Chapter 881. The wand was confiscated. Amelia blinked her crescent-shaped eyes, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. Her nose, with its pearl-like sheen, moved slightly closer to the small silver letters. Once she confirmed she had read it correctly, her clear and refined face displayed confusion. Without uttering a word, Amelia picked up the wool pen from the ink bottle on her desk, dipped it in ink, and swiftly wrote a line on a piece of paper. The young woman, who had graduated from Ilvermorny less than a year ago, quietly stood up and opened a box on the row of file cabinets behind her. The box resembled a microwave oven used by muggles. Amelia opened its door, placed the note inside, turned the knob to the correct position, and pressed a red button. With a flash of fire, the note vanished. Although Atticus Blaine was engaged in conversation with Miss Hill, at least 80% of his attention was on Amelia. Remus, too, was discreetly observing her. They both noticed Amelia's actions and had a sense of what she was doing, but chose not to comment. The reply arrived swiftly. As the box hummed softly, fire once again illuminated its dark interior, and a piece of parchment materialized out of thin air. Amelia eagerly opened the door, read the contents of the official document in the light, and called out softly, "Mandy." Amelia first glanced at Mr. Atticus Blaine with a slightly puzzled expression, then exchanged a look of disbelief with Mandy. "Amelia is the most outstanding witch I have ever met. It only took her a week to understand all my processes, while the last person took half a year and still couldn't use the office communication mailbox." "Security wants to seize your wand, Mr. Blaine?" Miss Hill exclaimed as she approached the microwave-like device. "I'm going to write a note and inquire. Just because the Graves family dominates Congress doesn't mean we can ignore the law. He has no right to make such a decision. Even Chairman Colhaug can't." "Wrongful behavior," she declared. The official document, filed by the Ministry of Security and signed by Mr. Graves, required Mr. Blaine to surrender his wand upon entering the country and to be accompanied at all times. Such treatment was typically reserved for prisoners or criminal suspects. Given Atticus Blaine's current reputation, it was astonishing that he would accept such harsh conditions. Even Mandy and Amelia, employees of the Magic Congress of the United States of America, found this treatment unacceptable for one of the leading wizards of their time. "That's ridiculous," Miss Hill shouted, scrutinizing the official document as if searching for signs of intoxication from the wizard who signed it. But upon inspection, everything appeared in order. Atticus raised his eyebrows, and Remus's expression darkened. They were already aware of the order issued by the Security Department of Makusa that Amelia had just relayed. Did the Makusa Security Department truly consider Atticus Blaine a prisoner, intending to keep him under their custody? Sensing something amiss, Miss Hill hurried over. She picked up Atticus's entry receipt and examined it. With Amelia's guidance, she quickly identified the issue. Speaking cheerfully to Atticus and Remus, Miss Hill asked for clarification. Then Amelia handed over the reply she had received and whispered, "Mandy." Remus frowned, stepping forward as if to speak, but Atticus Blaine raised a hand to stop him. With a calm smile, he said, "Yes, we have been informed in advance." Amelia knew Miss Hill had made a mistake. She held up the reply letter and Atticus's receipt, casting a cautious glance at Atticus Blaine, who returned her look with concern. "Perhaps you should take a look at this, they?" Mandy Hill's voice was filled with shock and confusion, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "How could they be so— Oh, is there something wrong, Amelia?" "Track Graves," Remus whispered in Atticus's ear. "He's the official who has repeatedly rejected our sales license submissions." Atticus nodded slightly, having heard Remus mention this several times before. Amelia looked at Atticus hesitantly. The orders from her superiors seemed unyielding, yet she also believed Mandy's statement lacked any legal foundation and was merely chaotic. "Thank you both for seeking justice for me." Atticus moved to stop Mandy from writing the note. He nodded his thanks to the two congressional officials he first encountered and smiled gently. "Although I personally cannot comprehend the Ministry of Security's decision, I trust they made it after careful consideration. Therefore, I believe Mr. Graves will not be easily swayed." This was common knowledge, yet everyone except Atticus felt discontented with him. After a moment's hesitation, Mandy whispered, I don't know exactly what happened, Mr. Blaine, but as I mentioned, Graves's family was among the original 12 who followed Chairman Josiah Jackson to establish the MAC. They wield significant internal power and influence over many key decisions, should you hope to achieve something here. Thank you for the reminder, Atticus nodded. So, his arm shook slightly and a wand fell into his hand. He handed it to Mandy and Amelia. Amelia accepted Atticus's wand with a hint of awe in her eyes. She then took it to the filing cabinet behind the desk, retrieving a brass balance-shaped alchemical machine. Amelia placed the wand on the scale, and the machine began to vibrate slightly. A narrow strip of parchment quickly emerged from a slot at the bottom. Amelia tore off the paper and read the words aloud. Maple wood, 9 inches long, with a phoenix feather core. Amelia's breathing quickened slightly. She pursed her lips, glancing at Atticus, then looked to Mandy for support. However, Mandy was still absorbed in the atmosphere, unaware of Amelia's gaze. Sorry, Mr. Blaine. Amelia took a deep breath, as if summoning great courage. She looked at Atticus with a serious expression. This does not match the information registered on the entry application. Your wand should be... Oh, Atticus patted his head and blinked innocently. Another wand slipped from the cuff of his left hand, which he handed to Amelia. Sorry, I forgot I have 2 wands. I use them occasionally. Remus's mouth twitched, but he refrained from commenting on Atticus's remark. Instead, he observed Amelia Dett, noticing a resemblance to Hermione Granger in her demeanor. Oh, Amelia, I told you, sometimes you don't have to be so serious. Mandy chided Amelia gently. Amelia's cheeks flushed red. She didn't defend herself, but silently placed the wand on the scale again. Ebony wand, 12 inches, core made of dragon's heart tendon. Seeing the information was correct, Amelia breathed a sigh of relief. She placed the 2 notes and the 2 wands into a small wooden box, securing it with magic. As she quickly prepared a certificate in hand, Atticus Blaine appeared deep in thought. As he completed the final pages of the small book, he suddenly spoke up. Could you pass along a request to the security department for me? End of this chapter. Chapter 882, Subtle Politics. The attack on Hermione prompted Atticus Blaine to traverse half of Europe in February, visiting cities like London, Paris, Berlin, and Bologna. These cities, considered international metropolises in the modern Muggle world, seemed to pale in comparison to New York City. This wasn't merely a matter of prosperity, it was about culture and ideas. None of the European cities Atticus visited possessed the vitality, openness, and inclusiveness that New York boasted. The United States in the 1990s was indeed a remarkable place, but the presidential suite was a picture of opulence. Dark red velvet carpet covered the floor, and a crystal chandelier cast a soft, dreamy glow. The retro, luxurious decor exuded a strong artistic atmosphere, complemented by a refreshing aroma in the air. Everything was so comfortable. Atticus tapped the ground with his toes, then gazed at a similar twin tower opposite the building where he was temporarily staying, a slightly strange expression on his face. In these parallel worlds, one had magic, and the other lacked any supernatural power system. Atticus had long since stopped pondering the reasons behind this. While his wisdom might be commendable among wizards, it was perhaps not as impressive when compared to the billions of Muggles. This enigma was one of the universe's most unfathomable mysteries, beyond his understanding. The ripples in his heart were stirred by the knowledge that the Twin Towers would face a grim fate in a few years. Whether the world would change again was anyone's guess. The glass windows reflected the city's blurry, hazy neon lights. Atticus's gaze pierced through the layers of light and shadow, focusing on a 50-story building a few streets away, adjacent to the beautiful Muggle City Hall Park. It was the Woolworth Building, home to the Magical Congress of the United States of America, MACUSA. Unlike the British Ministry of Magic, which was an underground structure exclusively for wizards, MACUSA was hidden within a Muggle-built building, shared with Muggles. Only by casting the correct spell could one access the space used by wizards. Atticus swirled the crystal glass in his hand, breaking up the sediment in the scarlet wine before taking a sip. He had a feeling that his trip to New York would lead to some intriguing stories. Something interesting had indeed occurred. Atticus frowned slightly, a rare trace of confusion in his eyes. In the past, even when facing the Dark Lord directly, Remus wouldn't have worried much about Atticus's safety. After all, even if he wasn't the Dark Lord's match, Remus would never believe that Atticus couldn't escape. He had witnessed Atticus destroy the seaside cave where Regulus slept. Faced with an unexpected restriction imposed by Macusa's security department, Atticus made specific demands. He was willing to accept Congress's surveillance, but he requested that the person monitoring him be Amalia, a recent graduate from the magic school. I had someone prepare some food. Click. Wait a minute. Atticus paused, contemplating. If this matter were reported, Remus was certain it would ignite a storm of public opinion in the wizarding world. But the situation had changed. A wizard without a wand was like a fire dragon with its fangs pulled out, its claws clipped, and its fire extinguished. Though it might still appear intimidating, its actual threat was significantly diminished. Yet thinking of this, Remus felt a surge of resentment, angered by what had happened to Atticus. His anger stemmed not only from their friendship, but also from a deeper sense of injustice. Atticus Blaine was undoubtedly a prominent figure in the British wizarding world. Targeting him was seen as a blatant disrespect to the entire British wizarding community. Moreover, Atticus himself held the esteemed position of vice president of the Wizards' Federation. The door swung open, and Remus entered the suite with a sense of urgency. Upon seeing Atticus gazing out at the night view through the glass window, he exhaled in relief. Ilia sent my wand to the security department for safekeeping. She'll be back later, so we can wait for her. In Europe, no matter which Ministry of Magic Atticus visited, he was always treated with the utmost respect. However, here, he faced an unprecedented level of disregard. Remus approached Atticus. "It can be delivered at any time," he said, raising an eyebrow, a smile finally reaching his eyes. It seemed Atticus had taken a liking to Amelia, something Remus had never witnessed before. When Atticus made his request, Miss Mandy Hill was momentarily taken aback, her expression shifting to one of subtle intrigue. She even took it upon herself to agree on Amelia's behalf. However, the Ministry of Security still had to weigh in. Amelia, usually reserved and cautious, blushed deeply, her neck turning crimson against her pale skin. Yet, under Atticus's calm gaze, she managed to suppress her shyness, nodding firmly and replying in a slightly trembling voice. "I will pass on your request, Mr. Blaine. I don't think the Magical Congress of the United States of America will agree," Remus mused, the smile fading from his eyes as he addressed Atticus, who was savoring a glass of wine. "I mean, the request you made, if the Magic Congress wants to monitor your every move within their territory, sending an experienced Auror would be the best choice. Amelia is a newly graduated witch." "If those American wizards aren't foolish," Atticus replied with a smile, "you should understand that whether it's a seasoned Auror or a rookie fresh out of school, they can't restrain me, even without a wand. In this case, having Amelia, a recent graduate, accompany me is a wiser choice." Remus frowned, pondering Atticus's words until he vaguely grasped their meaning. "But I still don't quite understand." After a long journey using Muggle transportation, Remus was exhausted. He poured himself a glass of wine, collapsed onto the sofa, and looked at Atticus, who was still admiring the New York skyline. "Given your status, Atticus, you came to the Magical Congress of the United States for a business visit. I understand you might want to follow protocol, but since the Magical Congress has been so discourteous, why not just write to Chairman Quohaug? I'm sure he would personally welcome you." "I did have a few encounters with Chairman Quohaug when we were in Paris," Atticus said, stepping back from the window and facing Remus. He gently rubbed his temples. "There are some things you might not be aware of, and I didn't anticipate them. That was indeed an oversight." "What do you mean?" Remus asked, puzzled. "The Magical Congress of the United States of America is currently undergoing a general election. Chairman Quohaug isn't in New York. He's in Miami campaigning for votes. This isn't the right time to contact him. Do you understand, Remus?" Remus stammered awkwardly. "Meeting with him now would carry too much political weight. People might think I came to New York at this critical moment just to support him, and I don't want to get entangled in their political turmoil. I already have enough troubles of my own, and Quohaug might. Why wouldn't he want to see me at this point?" Remus felt as if he had become the school's little wizard, bewildered by the arguments Atticus Blaine presented. Isn't it beneficial for him? With your esteemed reputation in the magical world, if Howgill could secure your support, even if it leads to some misunderstandings. Atticus smiled and replied, "It's never the ordinary voters who determine the outcome of an election. The upper echelons of the American wizarding community don't have the most harmonious relationship with Europe, particularly with the British wizarding community. The reasons for this are both subtle and complex, involving key controversies such as the organizational structure of the American wizarding community and even the founding of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. If those individuals were to learn that Atticus Blaine seemed interested in influencing the selection of the President of the Magical Congress, then Quahog would face significant trouble. Moreover, the tasks we need to accomplish here would multiply." Midway through his explanation, Atticus suddenly paused and glanced at the door. Before a knock could be heard, he rose from the sofa with a hint of urgency. "Amelia is back. Let's go grab something to eat first." End of this chapter. Chapter 883, Handover. Unlike the open, free, and dynamic atmosphere of American no-mage society, the American wizarding world is one of the most closed and isolated among magical civilizations worldwide. The Wizarding Secrecy Act is strictly enforced here, further strengthened by historical events such as the Salem witch trials in the 17th century, the swallow-tailed dogs bred by Harkaway attacking no-mages in the 18th century, and the witch Dorcas Twelvetrees revealing the magical world to her muggle lover at the end of the 18th century. The Bigfoot chaos of the 19th century and the mayhem caused by Grindelwald, Newt Scamander, and his adorable creatures in the 1920s also contributed to this isolation. For a long time, Makusa did not allow no-mage wizards to reveal the existence of the wizarding world to their close relatives, a law that was only repealed in the mid-20th century. These incidents, which had widespread and serious impacts, led the Magical Congress of the United States of America to enact laws requiring any wizard in the country, whether resident or tourist, to carry a wand license. This license is used to track all magical activities and identify perpetrators through their wands, a provision unique to the United States. Despite its notoriety, the Wand Licensing Office, disliked by both foreign tourists and local residents, receives little attention within Makusa. Although they share the Woolworth building with nomads, the space allocated to wizards is more than twice as large. Among hundreds of floors of affluent space, the Wand Licensing Office is tucked away in a room used for storing contraband. Visitors must navigate through high and low metal stairs and overcrowded shelves, wary of boxes labeled "No Touching" that might contain something dangerous. The department is sparsely staffed, with one office director who also holds other departmental roles and 2 employees to cover night shifts. Amelia stood in the dimly lit and chaotic Wand Licensing Office, holding the box containing Atticus Blaine's 2 wands. Her eyes fell on a man sleeping soundly at his desk. It wasn't particularly late, but the unfortunate soul on duty this month had already dozed off. Amelia hesitated, unsure whether to wake him. She knew that no one liked working in such a deserted and monotonous department, and it was generally reserved for those who had made mistakes. "No problem. What happened?" Chago asked in surprise, finally realizing where he was. The bloodshot eyes quickly cleared. "Yeah, it's okay. This has nothing to do with you anymore. Does it, Chago?" "Chago?" Amelia said softly, a trace of apology in her brown eyes. Chago shuddered, becoming more alert. He noticed the cardboard boxes and scattered documents on the ground. Impatiently, he pulled out his wand and waved it, not caring about the mess. His eyes fell on Amelia, who was holding a wooden box. "Amelia, you came to report to me. Tell me, what else was lost? The poison-horned beast or the chimera? Don't tell me those 5-legged monsters are missing. My heart can't bear this." His bloodshot gray eyes were sleepy, but his gaze wandered everywhere. "Those damn dangerous creatures are missing again," the man with messy, pale blonde hair said, looking frantic. Atticus Blaine's face was a picture of confusion, as if he had just woken up and was still trying to figure out where he was. Chago called out softly, rubbing his face vigorously with both hands, making a purring sound. "Sorry, I was a bit disoriented. Oh, you've reminded me that these troubles have left me. Honestly, if you think about it, coming here was a good choice for me. Amelia pursed her lips, pulled out her wand from her pocket, and pointed it lightly at the shelf. The heavy shelf trembled slightly, and then, boom, with a loud crash and a cloud of dust, the man who had been lounging with his legs on the desk, snoring, immediately opened his eyes and leapt from his chair. The scene was quite amusing. Amelia smirked and said to the panting Chago, "After wandering around this cramped space for a while, I placed a cardboard box on top of a shelf. It seems to contain a bunch of documents." Her mood was sour, and her temper was no better. Amelia thought that if she were assigned to this department, she would probably feel the same way. However, she couldn't stand around all night. She had to visit the security department later. "What's the deal with this box before you clock out? You sent the contraband your office confiscated from those clueless tourists to the wrong place, didn't you?" "I'm in charge of the wands here," Chago exclaimed. "Inside the box is the wand," Amelia replied, glancing down at the box in her arms, her tone slightly more forceful. "The Department of Security doesn't allow Mr. Atticus Blaine to bring a wand into the country. They won't issue him a wand license, so I brought his wand. Chago, I need you to keep Mr. Blaine's wand, and then write me an acceptance certificate. I need to take the certificate to the security department." "Oh, poor Atticus Blaine. How did he get tangled up with those bastards in the security department?" Chago muttered, curling his lips. He took the box from Amelia and carelessly tossed it onto the table, a move that made Amelia's eyes flash with irritation. Then he opened a drawer to prepare the certificate, but as soon as he picked up the parchment, he froze, looking at Amelia with confusion and helplessness. "Atticus Blaine?" Chago blinked hard. "Which Atticus Blaine are you talking about?" "Oh," Amelia spoke quickly, aware of the many places she still had to visit that night. "It's, the International Federation of Wizards." "Wow!" As soon as Amelia raised her head, Chago jumped up. He scratched his messy hair several times, his eyes widening. "You're talking about Atticus Blaine. The Ministry of Security wants to seize his wand." "Oh, is Graves out of his mind?" "He thinks his family's influence in Congress allows him to rule the world. He wants to seize Atticus Blaine's wand." "Oh God, Chairman Quahog. Oh, he's not here." Chago lowered his head, looking at the box with awe, but then turned his confused gaze back to Amelia. "Atticus Blaine's visit to Congress. Do you understand, Amelia? This is a big deal. Why wasn't it reported in the newspapers? Isn't it true that the ghost newspaper does more than follow the boring election and mysterious disappearances? Don't they have anything serious to cover?" "Oh, I think." Amelia finally found a chance to speak. She glanced at the acceptance certificate Chago had taken out, hoping he would take the hint, but Chago just stared at her. "It's because Mr. Blaine isn't visiting as the Vice President of the International Federation of Wizards or in any official capacity. He's handling some matters privately." "What is it?" Chago asked eagerly. "That's against the rules, Chago," Amelia said sternly, cutting him off before he could continue with his rambling. "Sorry, Chago, I'm in a hurry, so if you don't mind, just certify it." During the long night, Chago, who had nothing to do, finally got to work. Atticus Blaine grumbled in disappointment as he picked up the wooden box, initially intending to place it on the shelf behind him. However, midway through the motion, he changed his mind and decided to leave with the box. Amelia's gaze followed him through the passageway, obscured by the cluttered shelves, and she didn't reappear until some time later. Atticus Blaine's wand, if it shows up on the black market, will definitely be worth more than those magical creatures that might have been smuggled out of the country, she thought to herself. I have to be cautious. If anything goes wrong, I might have to attend Dylan's class. Dylan was the gatekeeper to Congress, and it was clear that Amelia was anxiously waiting. Noticing her impatience, Chago didn't waste any more time. He hurried back to his seat to issue a certificate for the transfer of the items. You forgot to write the time, Amelia pointed out quickly, stretching her neck to observe Chago's actions before he handed the certificate to her. Oh, sorry, Chago replied, adding the time after signing the document and then handing it to Amelia. She carefully examined the note, and after confirming there were no issues, she thanked him and prepared to leave. Could you ask Mr. Blaine for an autograph for me? My girlfriend is a huge fan of his fire magic. Chago called out loudly towards the exit passage as Amelia disappeared from view. End of this chapter. Chapter 884. Some situations. In terms of sheer numbers, the wizards inhabiting this vast land far outnumber their European counterparts. To maintain order within this larger wizarding society and ensure harmony with the no-mage community, the governing body, the Magical Congress of the National Magical Civilization, must exert considerable effort. As night deepened, the Capitol building's lobby, steeped in profound heritage and ancient history, remained bustling with activity. Employees moved about with anxious expressions and hurried steps. Amelia stood in line in the elevator hall, waiting for the elevator. She watched an elevator car ascend until it vanished into the immense light source illuminating the building's roof. Despite having worked in Congress for nearly 6 months, every time Amelia entered the Capitol and gazed up at the roof, she couldn't help but feel a sense of insignificance. It was reminiscent of her first glimpse of the world-renowned Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry atop Mount Greylock, which filled her heart with awe. A whimsical thought crossed her mind. Could Atticus Blaine possess the power to shake the Capitol? Albus Dumbledore is hailed as the greatest wizard of our time, while Atticus Blaine is considered the most powerful. Amelia knew this belief was widespread in the European wizarding world, but across the ocean in the United States, it wasn't a universally accepted view. Some well-born officials in Congress acknowledged Dumbledore's remarkable achievements, but dismissed him as an old man over 100 years old. Even Merlin, at such an age, might not have many accomplishments left. They believed Dumbledore's abilities no longer merited the title of the greatest. The battle that catapulted Atticus Blaine to fame occurred during the Quidditch World Cup Finals last August. Blaine demonstrated his unparalleled magical prowess before 100,000 wizards from around the world. However, controversy arose regarding the magic he employed. Many wizards in the American academic community speculated that Blaine used a fire spell. Setting aside the legality of this magic, they argued that if Blaine had lost control of his fire spell, the damage that night could have been catastrophic. Yet Amelia wasn't so biased. She understood that the magic Blaine wielded was far more complex. A wizard mentioned Newt Scamander earlier, and his companion remarked in a casual tone, "He visits every few years. If you know him well, you'd know his wife, Miss Tina Goldstein, is a local. She was once an Auror in the security department." When it was her turn, the elevator was already crowded. However, a freckled man near the door, seemingly taken by Amelia's appearance, squeezed in, ignoring the complaints of others. He smiled at Amelia and said, "Come on, there's still room. If you miss this one, it's another 10-minute wait." Amelia couldn't say she had a favorable impression of this man after reading about his actions in the newspaper. Unlike Mandy, who had her family's lives saved by Blaine, Amelia's feelings were more complex. Perhaps it was because Atticus Blaine was a Londoner, or maybe because, "Did you hear that Mr. Scamander is in New York?" Someone at the front of the line whispered, interrupting Amelia's thoughts. She blinked her brown eyes, perked up her ears, and listened in. Finally, the elevator descended to the first floor, and the long-stalled line began to move. As time began to flow, the conversation in the elevator caught Amelia's attention. "Oh, everyone knows about this," one wizard said. "I heard Atticus Blaine is here because of the missing magical creatures. He's issued a stern warning to the Ministry of Security. Despite the close monitoring of their habitats, they still don't know how these creatures are escaping. If they run amok in the no-mage world, it could spell disaster for both them and us." "That's not exactly breaking news, is it?" the other wizard replied. Amelia was relieved that this man wasn't pestering her like the boys at school often did. Despite her hesitation, she decided to engage with the stranger's kindness. "Oh, thank you," she said, stepping into the conversation. Amelia was well aware of the missing magical creatures. Chago had been reprimanded over the incident, but she hadn't anticipated it would draw the attention of the renowned Walter Scamander. She was eager to learn more, but the two wizards exited the elevator before she could ask further questions. As the elevator reached the dimly lit lobby, Amelia arrived at her destination, the security department, which occupied an entire floor. The silence there was almost palpable, lending an air of solemnity. The office hall was sparsely populated, which was expected since most of the department's work was conducted outdoors. Those who remained were typically involved in administrative tasks. Under normal circumstances, Amelia would have handed the certificate she received from Chago to Ms. Ross, who managed such matters. However, she had grievances about the Ministry of Security's decisions and needed to address them directly with the department's head, Mr. Truck Graves. If he was willing to entertain a newcomer like her, that is. Fortunately, Mr. Graves' office window was still illuminated. The heads of various congressional departments convened at the end of each day to discuss progress and share updates on their top priorities. Attendance was mandatory unless something urgent arose. Amelia had prepared herself for a long wait. Hesitation could lead to misinterpretation by the security department employees, whose watchful eyes followed her as she approached Mr. Graves' office. Resolute, Amelia clutched the certificate Chago had given her and knocked on the door without further delay. "Please come in," a calm, middle-aged male voice called from inside. Amelia took a deep breath, pursed her lips, and pushed the door open. Mr. Graves' office was surprisingly modest for someone of his stature, comparable in size to her dormitory at Ilvermorny. It was filled with filing documents for various cases. As Amelia entered, Graves was placing the latest issue of the New York Ghost on a newspaper shelf behind him. He turned to face her, a flicker of curiosity in his brown-reddish eyes. "I am Amelia Dett, from the Wizarding Immigration Office, sir," she introduced herself. As the director of security appraised her, Amelia took the opportunity to observe Truck Graves. This was only her second close encounter with the influential official since joining Congress. He wore a sharp black suit with a retro flair, his shirt buttons fastened neatly. Despite a long day, his attire showed minimal signs of wear, and even his polished leather shoes retained their pristine condition. Amelia's gaze lingered on the black and gray strands at his temples, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Amelia. Dett stood before Graves, a man not yet 50, at the pinnacle of his career. His frown etched faint lines between his eyebrows, silently conveying his authority. Yet, as quickly as they appeared, the lines vanished and his expression softened. "If I recall correctly, we've met before, haven't we, Amelia?" Graves extended his hand in a welcoming gesture as he returned to his office, his tone becoming more congenial. "You graduated from Thunderbird Academy at Ilvermorny last year with outstanding grades and expressed a desire to join the security department. However, I turned you down, didn't I?" Despite the softening of Mr. Graves's tone, Amelia could still feel the imposing aura radiating from the man just a few feet away, causing her heart to race involuntarily. "Yes, sir. That's correct. You deemed me unsuitable for the position, but offered no explanation," Amelia replied, her lips pursed with a hint of dissatisfaction. Graves squinted, as if searching his memory for the reason he had rejected this seemingly capable young woman. A smile crept onto his face as he noticed the document Amelia held tightly in her arms. With a thoughtful expression, he asked, "So, Amelia, are you here to apply again?" End of this chapter. Chapter 885, Different Perspectives. After taking a seat, a flicker of emotion passed through Amelia's brown eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. This was not the reason she had come here. "You misunderstand, Mr. Graves," Amelia said, standing up and handing the receipt from the Wand licensing office to Mr. Graves, who sat across the desk. "I'm here because the Immigration Administration, following the Department of Security's instructions, has confiscated the wand of Atticus Blaine, who entered the country this evening. I've sent Mr. Blaine's wand to the Wand licensing office for safekeeping. Chago Lyman, who is on duty tonight, issued this certificate of acceptance to me. According to procedure, I need to send this certificate to the security department for filing." Amelia was supposed to deliver the acceptance certificate to Rose outside, not directly to Mr. Graves. However, he chose not to point out her mistake and instead took the certificate, examining the details of the two wands confiscated from Atticus Blaine as registered on the document. After a moment, he asked with interest, "How did he seem emotionally?" Amelia sensed a hint of malice in the question, but she decided to answer truthfully. Mr. Blaine appeared calm and did not protest. "Is that so? Remarkable fellow," Graves mused. "Oh, That has nothing to do with it, sir. Rules and regulations. Upon hearing the inquiry, Amelia's fists clenched on her knees, a blush rising on her smooth porcelain cheeks, and a trace of defiance flickering in her pure brown eyes. I question the decision of the Ministry of Security, Mr. Graves, she said, understanding the implication behind his words, but maintaining her composure. I just think even the Ministry of Security needs to play by the rules, don't you? Amelia knew that Mr. Graves could easily dismiss her concerns and send her away without any explanation. This was the outcome she had anticipated before entering the office, yet she was determined to voice her opinion. Her breath caught for a moment, and the blush on her cheeks deepened as she gathered the courage to meet Mr. Graves's gaze. In a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a redness in his eyes. But when she blinked and looked again, she realized it was just her imagination. "So, you're an admirer of Atticus Blaine?" Graves asked, his tone surprised, though his eyes betrayed little emotion. Amelia paused before responding. Mr. Blaine also expressed his acceptance. Graves sighed, and this time, Amelia detected a hint of hesitation in his voice, as if he was grappling with something unresolved. However, he quickly regained his composure, aware that he should not reveal too much emotion in front of his subordinates. He turned to Amelia, his expression shifting. After a prolonged silence, Graves addressed Amelia again, his tone more cautious. "So, regarding the Ministry of Security's decision to require congressional personnel to accompany you throughout the entry period, what does Blaine think of this?" Graves maintained a neutral expression, but internally he held a high regard for the young woman before him. He understood why Amelia had bypassed protocol to hand the certificate directly to him. For a young witch, freshly graduated, to challenge high-ranking officials in Congress required immense courage, especially since Amelia aspired to join the Ministry of Security one day, a department that housed the most elite members of Congress. This act demonstrated even greater bravery. Graves paused for a moment, then asked, "What noble moral character is needed?" Amelia sat upright in her seat and spoke clearly. According to the regulations and related legal provisions promulgated by Congress regarding the entry of foreign wizards, there is no provision to support the legitimacy of the decision made by the Ministry of Security against Atticus Blaine, Mr. Graves. Atticus Blaine has no criminal record and is not involved in any of the cases under investigation. The Security Department has no right to confiscate his wand or infringe on his personal freedom. Is that so? Graves seemed surprised by Amelia's confident words. He repeated her words with a slight, perhaps sarcastic smile on his lips. "Do you think Atticus Blaine will adhere to the rules and regulations you mentioned, Amelia?" Amelia instinctively wanted to reply, but the question left her in a dilemma. She believed that a wizard like Atticus Blaine, renowned in the modern magical world, must possess impeccable moral character. However, she realized that such an assumption lacked a solid foundation, as she did not personally know Atticus Blaine. "But I don't understand, Mr. Graves," Amelia frowned. "What does this have to do with the Security Department's decision to seize Mr. Blaine's wand?" "No one likes to follow rules and procedures, Amelia. People admire freedom and unrestrained living," Graves said, his face illuminated by the dim light, giving him an imposing presence. "But if everyone acted solely on their desires, the world would descend into chaos. Therefore, rules and regulations are necessary to maintain order in the magical world. You ask why we seized Atticus Blaine's wand, and I'll tell you why." Graves leaned forward slightly, resting his intertwined fingers on the table, his sharp gaze fixed on Amelia, who appeared bewildered. "For a wizard like Atticus Blaine, rules and systems are ineffective. The punitive measures meant to uphold these rules are useless against him. If he chooses, he can act on his own whims and disrupt the magical world we inhabit, leaving us powerless. Frankly, I do not welcome such wizards into the American wizarding community, especially at this sensitive time, and you know what I mean. But I can't completely refuse Atticus Blaine. His influence in the wizarding world is growing, so we both need to make concessions. I allow him entry, and in return, he must prove to me that he is not a threat. Do you understand, Amelia?" "But," Amelia was stunned for a moment before regaining her composure. Her emotions were clearly stirred, and she responded angrily, We cannot take unfair measures against Mr. Atticus Blaine just because he is perceived as a threat. Mr. Graves, he is a hero who saved 100,000 people, not a criminal. That's your perspective, Amelia, Graves replied expressionlessly. It's not mine. I prefer not to regret after a disaster occurs. The city's past experiences with disasters have taught us to be cautious when dealing with wizards of extraordinary abilities. Raising his hand to interrupt Amelia's impending response, Graves spoke in a commanding tone. Thank you for informing me that everything went well, Amelia. Now, you may leave. Amelia's lips tightened and her fair cheeks flushed with anger. Mr. Graves, who had seemed approachable moments ago, now displayed indifference. He ignored Amelia, rising from his seat to peruse the bookshelf filled with newspapers, continuing to read through publications other than the New York Ghost. Even though Amelia had long known that she couldn't change the Ministry of Security's decision to wield power over the rules, she still felt a surge of anger when confronted with the outcome. Suppressing her emotions, she stood up without uttering a word and walked silently toward the door. There is something else I need to report to you. The cold touch of the doorknob jolted Amelia. She turned around to face Mr. Graves, who stood by the bookshelf. Graves regarded the inexperienced young witch at the door, his silence speaking volumes, the restraint in his dark red eyes unmistakable. Atticus Blaine has agreed to allow security agents to monitor his activities in New York, but he has set a condition, Graves said, raising his gray eyebrows. What condition? Amelia inquired. He wants me to be the one to monitor him, she replied. End of this chapter. Chapter 886, Secret. He wants you to be responsible for monitoring him? Graves squinted his eyes, repeating Amelia's account. His tone betrayed his confusion. Amelia simply nodded, offering no additional explanation. From her calm demeanor, Graves surmised that she and Atticus Blaine were strangers before this encounter. Could it be that Blaine had taken a liking to Amelia upon their first meeting? It wasn't difficult to ascertain Atticus Blaine's age, as Graves had already reviewed the entry application materials sent by Remus from the UK. There was no doubt that Blaine was a prodigious wizard, achieving remarkable feats in magic at such a young age. Aside from some exaggerated legends, Graves had never encountered a comparable figure in history. It was rumored that Atticus Blaine did not have a partner, which led Graves to briefly entertain the notion that Blaine might be interested in Amelia. Nonsense, he concluded after a brief analysis. Although Graves had never met Atticus Blaine, the few words he had heard from Chairman Quahog and the numerous reports in the Daily Prophet painted a vivid picture of Blaine in his mind. A person of Blaine's stature would surely understand the impact of his actions, especially on foreign soil. It was inconceivable for Atticus Blaine to behave frivolously. Graves instinctively wanted to refuse the arrangement, but he had to consider Blaine's feelings. Given the current situation, it seemed Blaine was cooperative, possibly due to some business in New York. As he had just told Amelia, both parties needed to make concessions. So, would you like to come work in the security department, Amelia? Sorry, Miss Rose. Mr. Graves would like you to come to his office. Could it be a coincidence? Oh, I'll go right away. As Amelia passed by the curly-haired Miss Rose, she was nearly giddy with excitement, almost forgetting her future boss's instructions. It wasn't until she reached the elevator hall that she hurried back to ask the person organizing the records of missing magical animals. Ms. Rose's response left Amelia wide-eyed with surprise. She hadn't expected Mr. Graves to agree to this arrangement, allowing her to accompany Blaine throughout the process. Graves frowned deeply. This wasn't his original intention. He had wanted to assign an experienced and loyal Auror to oversee Blaine, not an inexperienced young witch. Yet, a sudden thought struck him. Could this be Blaine's way of saving face? Oh, I wasn't planning on changing my plans, Graves muttered. This is the file you requested on Amelia Det, sir. Miss Ross handed over the documents. Graves, known for his stern demeanor, nodded and signaled for Ross to leave. Thank you, he said solemnly. Understanding her boss's decisive nature, Mrs. Ross didn't delay. She quickly gathered her things and headed to Mr. Graves' office with her notebook. Within half a minute, she exited, and Amelia had already left the security department. Following a world-renowned magician was undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Amelia couldn't deny her desire for it, yet she was still in disbelief that Mr. Graves had compromised. After all, he had previously insisted that no one, not even Mr. Blaine, could enter the country without a wand. The previous requirement issued by the security department was that Aurors must be in charge. "Will you accept this assignment, Amelia?" But, about 10 minutes later, Ms. Ross returned with the information Mr. Graves had requested, jogging into the supervisor's office once more. When she emerged, Amelia still appeared dazed. Half of what had transpired in the office was as she had anticipated, but the other half was entirely unexpected. She hadn't anticipated that her plan would lead to such an unexpected opportunity. Atticus Blaine had promised her that if she completed the task successfully, she would pass the entry test to join the most elite group of wizards in Congress. This was a chance she had never imagined. Luo had been dreaming of this career for as long as she could remember. The file in front of her was comprehensive, detailing objective evaluations of Amelia's daily performance and abilities by the heads of the 2 departments she had served in since joining Makusa. It included every test score from her time at Ilvermorny, the honors she had earned for the college, and even the school rules she had broken. It also contained information about Amelia's family, a brief introduction to her family members, their place of residence, and their ancestral home. As Atticus read through the file, his expression grew increasingly serious. His sharp eyes lingered on certain words, and his brows furrowed deeply. After a while, he set the file aside, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the ceiling with an unfocused gaze. Suddenly, he stood up, quickly gathered the documents into a box, and walked towards the fireplace on the other side of his office. Theoretically, the fireplace in the congressional office was not meant for private use, and Atticus would not normally break the rules. However, he was driven by a pressing need to understand something, and he couldn't be bothered with bureaucratic red tape. With a swirl of green flames enveloping him, he spun and vanished from his office, reappearing in a house in New York. The lights in the room automatically turned on, sensing the return of its owner. The flames in the fireplace remained lit despite Atticus's departure. The house was empty. His real home was elsewhere. This was merely a safe house in the Bronx, New York. Atticus strode up the spiral staircase and entered the study, placing the file box next to the desk. He glanced at a letter from a renowned magical creature expert, which had urged him to take seriously the potential risks of losing magical animals. Though he couldn't pinpoint why, a stern look flashed in his dark red eyes as he read it. He folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, intending to write to someone. But before he could reach for the quill and the ink bottle, his expression changed abruptly. A suppressed, painful retching sound escaped him, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. The blood, tinged with gray and carrying a faint stench of decay, stained the fresh paper. Instantly, Atticus's face turned as pale as snow, and his vision blurred. He staggered and collapsed into a chair. The pain persisted, and large drops of cold sweat trickled from his gray temples, down his cheeks, and left dark yellow stains on his white collar. Despite the severity of the situation, Atticus did not appear shocked. It was clearly not the first time he had experienced this. After a moment to catch his breath, he struggled to his feet, using the table for support, and made his way to a niche in the fireplace wall. Inside the niche was a copper alchemy instrument, though it was not his target. He leaned on the lower edge of the niche to steady himself, fiddling with the instrument blindly, his hands brushing against the white relief on the inner wall. Click! With a soft sound, the relief panel fell away. The panel slid down, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a bottle of crimson potion laced with golden threads and a mysterious magic book. Gudu, gudu, gudu. Graves eagerly uncorked the bottle and poured the potion into his mouth. As the last drop of the potion, which felt like molten gold, slipped down his throat, Graves breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed to the floor. The effect was immediate. The gray, rancid blood that had seeped from his mouth and nose regained its vibrant hue. As a red mist rose, the blood that had stained the corners of his mouth and clothes seemed to reverse, as if time itself had rewound. Graves' throat trembled slightly, sending shivers through his entire body. Silence enveloped the room. broken only by the ticking of the old-fashioned wall clock. The moon hung red in the sky, shrouded by wisps of black clouds and smoke. A few old crows, startled by the cold wind, flapped their wings and flew over the roof of the solitary building, their cries piercing the night. Finally, Graves stood silently, clutching the empty glass bottle tightly in his hands, a few gray hairs falling from his neatly styled temples. "Decryption of advanced black magic," he muttered, staring intently at the magic book hidden in the niche. His expression was vaguely ferocious, as if he was struggling to restrain himself. Click. The mechanism closed, and with a wave of his wand, the glass bottle vanished. Graves returned to his desk, sitting down with a weary air of dejection. He panted slightly, his eyes falling once more on Amelia's dossier. He stared at it in silence for a long time before shaking his head and looking away. He pulled Newt Scamander's warning letter from the drawer again. "Oops," he sighed wearily, the sound echoing softly in the study. End of this chapter. Chapter 8 and 87, Ancestry. By the time Amelia returned to the hotel where Atticus Blaine and his assistant were staying, it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. Considering the long journey they had endured that day, she assumed they would have retired for the night. Planning to inform them of Mr. Blaine's request being granted the following morning, she booked a room in the Muggle Hotel where they were staying. As she passed by their room with her suitcase, the previously closed door unexpectedly opened. Amelia glanced over cautiously and noticed that neither Mr. Blaine nor Mr. Lupin had gone to bed. Mr. Lupin was seated in the small dining room of the presidential suite, discussing something with Mr. Blaine. Atticus sat at the head of the table, supporting his chin with his fists, and greeted her with a gentle smile. "Are you done?" Atticus asked softly, his gaze shifting to the suitcase beside Amelia. Amelia nodded instinctively, then furrowed her brow slightly. She quickly scanned the area to ensure no one else was around, stepped into the room, and asked seriously, "Do you have any other wands, Mr. Blaine?" "I don't need a wand to cast spells," Atticus chuckled, glancing at Remus. "So I suppose we all need a late-night snack to appease our hungry stomachs, Remus?" "Certainly. Oh, thank you so much." Atticus approached with a wineglass in hand, his eyes returning to Amelia's suitcase. "The Ministry of Security has agreed to my request, right?" After a brief moment of confusion, Amelia nodded. "Yes, Mr. Blaine, Mr. Graves has agreed to your request. During your stay in New York, I will be responsible for your safety, especially since you have temporarily lost your wand." "Anything is fine, Mr. Blaine." Atticus raised his glass to Amelia across the dining table, smiling. "I trust my safety will be fully guaranteed. You see, Amelia, for reasons we both understand, it seems we'll be spending some time together. Perhaps we should introduce ourselves." Amelia thought this could only be explained by the great magician's generous spirit. She didn't mention her efforts to fight for Atticus's rights, which had been rejected. Atticus Blaine needed no introduction. His achievements were well documented on the chocolate frog card. Amelia realized it was her turn to introduce herself. "So to say," Amelia began cautiously, aware that Atticus Blaine was a legend in the contemporary magical world. Atticus smiled and nodded. "You graduated from Ilvermorny? What would you like to drink?" Atticus asked politely as he strolled to the wine rack. "Just call me Atticus. Then have some sweet sherry. It will help you sleep," he suggested with a smile. Amelia watched as he merely flicked his fingers and the cork sealing the bottle slid out smoothly. Remus quickly packed up the documents, nodded amicably to Amelia, and exited the room. "Yes, Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Thunderbird Academy," Amelia replied, observing the young man standing in the soft light and shadow. She felt a strange sensation, knowing she was officially assigned by Congress to monitor Atticus Blaine. Yet the man before her was surprisingly good-natured, showing no hostility or resistance towards her or Congress. Wandless and silent casting, though a minor magic, demonstrated Atticus Blaine's extraordinary magical prowess. In just a short time, he had already performed 2 spells in front of her. Amelia wasn't sure if this constituted a violation, but she was undeniably impressed. Although Amelia Decker didn't agree with Mr. Graves's perspective, she was committed to her mission. If the security department decided to confiscate Atticus Blaine's wand, rendering him unable to cast spells, she would carry out her duties diligently. Well, my name is Amelia Decker. I used to work in the Immigration Management Office under the International Magical Cooperation Department of the Magical Congress of the United States. Now, Mr. Graves has assigned me to intern in the Security Department. How's it going there? Atticus Inc. You hired. Very good, Amelia replied. At the mention of school, her brown eyes sparkled, and a smile crept onto her face. She almost instinctively declared, Ilvermorny is the best magic school in the world, and Thunderbird Academy is the best in Nigeria. However, she quickly realized that Atticus Blaine, standing before her, was affiliated with another renowned magic school. Her words might have sounded provocative to him, yet Atticus didn't seem bothered by her arrogant remarks. He nodded with a smile and regarded Amelia with an appraising gaze. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might be Muggle-born like me, right? Yes, Amelia nodded, admiration gleaming in her eyes as she looked at Atticus. The distinction between purebloods, mixed bloods, and Muggle-borns exists in magical societies worldwide. Generally, Muggle-borns face the most challenges. Even if they excel in school through hard work and determination, they often lag behind in society due to a lack of familial protection and connections. Amelia's achievements were already considered exceptional among Muggle-borns. Despite societal biases, Atticus Blaine's success provided a powerful counterexample to the notion that Muggle-born wizards were inferior to purebloods and mixed bloods. I take it you didn't grow up in New York, did you? Atticus asked, studying Amelia. Perhaps it's my imagination, but I thought I detected a hint of a Cockney accent. Oh, I actually did grow up in New York, Amelia explained. My English accent comes from my parents, who are originally from London. Oh, really? Atticus remarked, taking a sip from his wineglass with a hint of regret. What a pity. We might have been classmates. Hopefully, I didn't miss out on great conversations, Amelia replied. For some reason, Remus Lupin took a while to return. When he did, he was accompanied by a waiter pushing a dining cart. As he entered, he raised his eyebrows at Atticus with a smile. I thought you were lost, Remus, Atticus said calmly, ignoring Remus's teasing. With the help of good food and drink, the conversation flowed smoothly, and Amelia no longer felt nervous. She found both Mr. Blaine and the older Mr. Lupin to be approachable wizards. Atticus, in particular, was funny, humorous, and unpretentious. It was hard to believe he was a great magician who had accomplished such remarkable feats. Moreover, his attitude towards unfair treatment was admirable. If she had been in his position, Amelia doubted she could have remained so composed. Atticus also candidly shared the purpose of their visit to New York, to obtain a sales license for a magical alchemy tool. It was a fascinating instrument, and Amelia recalled her early days at Ilvermorny, where she had worked tirelessly to keep up with her peers. If the school had possessed such a learning machine back then, everything would have been much simpler. Of course, the primary purpose of this device is not to allow professors to slack off. Its true significance lies in the democratization of magical education and the cultivation of elite talent. Its value is beyond measure. I'd like to write a letter to Professor Layden on your behalf, Atticus, said Amelia, slightly tipsy after experiencing the prototype firsthand. She spoke with a hint of frustration. He is the dean of Thunderbird Academy and a very wise wizard. I believe he will recognize the importance of making this device widely available, especially if it doesn't pass the joint review in a week. Thank you for your support, Amelia, Atticus replied with a smile. I am confident that I can overcome any obstacles and allow everyone to benefit from its convenience. End of this chapter. Chapter 888, Surveillance. Atticus Blaine did not intentionally announce his arrival in New York through any channels, yet the news of the renowned Atticus Blaine landing in the city spread like wildfire. By noon the following day, mysterious wizards began to appear in the corridor outside the suite where Atticus and Remus were staying. These individuals did not knock on the door, but instead posed as ordinary guests. As they passed by the room, they would discreetly eavesdrop on the conversations within. The suites occupied by Atticus, Remus, and Amelia, as well as the rooms adjacent, above and below theirs, were all booked. These individuals spent lavishly, throwing away tens of thousands of dollars, seemingly determined to remain close to Atticus until his departure. Is this the work of the Max Security Department? Remus speculated, visibly annoyed. Although these people refrained from using magic to eavesdrop, their presence was unsettling. He glanced at Atticus, who was seated at the desk, reading a letter. Usually composed and gentle, Atticus's expression was now grim. "I don't think so," Atticus replied. Vip had received recognition from the ministers of magic from the countries where Durmstrang's main students hailed. They were set to meet with Durmstrang's school board soon to discuss his promotion to principal. This was undoubtedly good news, but Atticus seemed unsurprised. He knew that with Vip's qualifications and prestige, this outcome was inevitable. However, the situation Sirius had informed him about was less optimistic. Atticus had initially used Hermione's attack to advocate for the expansion of the British Ministry of Magic's striker team. With support from himself and Amelia, Sirius was poised to secure a leadership role as his deputy. I suspect these people were sent by wealthy dignitaries who learned of my arrival in New York through various channels. Mr. Greenstitch doesn't stand a chance, Atticus continued. It was no secret that the Weasley family had close ties with Dumbledore, and Sirius, under Dumbledore's guidance, had invited Arthur to join the Order of the Phoenix. When rumors within the Ministry of Magic couldn't be contained, Arthur made statements urging vigilance. "What do you mean?" Remus asked, puzzled. After the second game, the relationship between Hogwarts and the Ministry of Magic had suddenly deteriorated. Fudge, due to Amelia's efforts, did not immediately expel Sirius from the ministry, but Percy faced setbacks because of this turmoil. Fudge, angered, reassigned Percy to the Centaur Liaison Office for failing to promptly discover his boss's kidnapping and assassination. In terms of inactivity, only the Ghost Office could rival it. Furthermore, since they have discovered my presence here, they must also know the purpose of our visit. Yet, they refuse to believe that I am here solely for business, Atticus remarked, glancing at the sofa's color with slight embarrassment. Amelia, pretending to read a book, smiled. It shows that he doesn't mind letting people know his thoughts and worries. Therefore, there is no need for him to send so many people here without prior notice, Atticus continued. Since he publicly announced taking my wand and asked Amelia to accompany me, the team of hitters being formed had now been entrusted to Deluxe, who had repeatedly demonstrated extraordinary feats. This individual was now as popular as his immediate superior, Rufus Scrimgeour. They probably want to confirm whether I will intervene in the ongoing general election. They want to know if I support Chairman Quohog's re-election or if I back the Dark Horse candidate. Atticus Blaine, a descendant of one of the 12, Deladamon Greenstitch, was deeply engrossed in his thoughts. After penning a letter to Sirius, advising him to remain calm and composed, Atticus placed his quill back into the inkwell, stood up, and stretched. Well, although I haven't dealt with Track Graves face-to-face, various signs suggest he's not the type of wizard who indulges in unnecessary actions, he mused. D aloud. Remus frowned, contemplating Atticus's words, and eventually nodded, albeit reluctantly. Perhaps in an attempt to apologize for the surveillance they were under, Amelia spoke in a subdued tone. She had overindulged the previous night, succumbing to someone's persuasive drinking skills, and her head still throbbed. Atticus merely shrugged, indicating his indifference, which only seemed to heighten Amelia's dissatisfaction. She closed her book with a snap and rose from the sofa, her expression serious. "They have no right to spy on you, Atticus Blaine. This is completely illegal. I can expel these people, and if they resist, I'll seek support from Mr. Graves," she declared firmly. "What do you intend to do? Prove they're spying on me?" Atticus replied with a smile, shaking his head. "They could easily claim it's a coincidence, or that they're admirers hoping to catch a glimpse of me. Isn't that plausible? After all, they haven't disturbed my peace or attempted to cast spells on this house." Amelia was momentarily at a loss for words. "Are we going to let our entire trip to New York be under their watchful eyes, Atticus?" Remus asked, his dissatisfaction evident. Having learned management from the goblins and dealt with numerous learning machine supply chain manufacturers, Remus had grown more confident in expressing his emotions. "I thought we needed to visit the wizards who might influence the review results before the joint review meeting. But with so many people following us, we can't accomplish anything." "There's only one obstacle in our path, Remus." Atticus said with a knowing smile. That's Mr. Graves, the one who refused to grant us a sales license because he deemed our instrument unsafe. The Graves family has been entrenched in U.S. congressional politics for centuries. Without his approval, we can't achieve our goal. Visiting others would be futile and might even backfire, as the wizards here might suspect we're rallying support for a particular candidate. Remus fell silent, unable to navigate such a complex situation. He began to wonder if their trip to New York was a mistake, a venture undertaken at the wrong time. Listening to Atticus and Remus discuss Mr. Graves, who was soon to be her direct superior, Amelia pursed her lips, not out of irritation, but confusion. She had seen the remarkable alchemical instrument the previous night. Atticus had explained that it wasn't his sole creation, but a collaborative effort involving Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, including Professor Albus Dumbledore. This collective wisdom seemed a strong assurance, and she couldn't fathom why Mr. Graves had rejected their application. But there was no point in dwelling on it now. They had to wait for the joint review meeting to commence. While I don't think it's appropriate to visit anyone else right now, you're right about one thing, Remus, Atticus said, breaking the somber atmosphere. He walked over to the coat rack, donned his coat, and continued, "We can still do some groundwork." "Where are we going?" Remus asked, quickly putting on his coat as well. Amelia rose from the sofa, ready to join them. Silently, Atticus Blaine observed Remus, who was diligently casting protective spells around the room. With a slight smile, Atticus remarked, "I've heard there's a good place nearby to gather some information." He paused, ensuring Remus was listening, then continued, "The Blind Pig Bar. Let's head there. I hope we can evade any tracking efforts smoothly." End of this chapter. Chapter 889. Cat. Before arriving in New York, Atticus Blaine hadn't anticipated a warm reception from the Magic Congress of the United States of America. The repeated rejections of Remus's applications had already hinted at underlying issues. As an unwelcome guest, Atticus knew it was wise to remain low-key and humble, so he ignored the wizards who surrounded his and Remus's residence. However, this didn't mean Atticus would tolerate all offensive behavior. His earlier comment at the hotel about getting rid of the stalker was merely a jest. If these people truly persisted in following them everywhere, Atticus wouldn't hesitate to use some unfriendly means to remind them of their boundaries. Near the twin towers of the World Trade Center, rows of modern skyscrapers reached for the clouds. This was one of New York's most prosperous business districts, bustling with no-maj elites in suits and ties. Luxury cars gleamed on the roads, and Atticus stood on the sidewalk, listening to the traffic while his eyes roamed over a towering building. He felt a twinge of nostalgia for the modern city atmosphere, reminiscent of his previous life. Blind Pig Bar. Those spying on them knew better than to follow once they left the hotel. But Remus remained vigilant. He had already sensed the unfriendly attitude of the Magic Congress's higher-ups towards him and Atticus. With Atticus having lost his wand, Remus felt responsible for their safety. In this modern city, Amelia misunderstood Atticus's admiration for no-mages, thinking he was lost. Although she disapproved of Atticus visiting a place where people and animals mingled, her role was to follow him, not to dictate his choices. "When I was studying at Ilvermorny, I heard my classmates talk about it, but they never mentioned the address," Amelia said, her voice tinged with guilt and admiration for the great magician under surveillance. Atticus, unaware of the subtle changes in their expressions, noticed a dense grove nearby and waved them over. Changing one's appearance was an advanced transformation, and for safety reasons, Atticus, without his wand, asked Remus to perform the spell. Despite Amelia's poor grades in each course, she was considered an elite due to her excellence, and altering her appearance wasn't difficult. "It looks better this way," Remus chuckled. "It's James, with a hint of serious. Look, your eyes are gray." "Come on, we need to change our appearance if we don't want to be gawked at like monkeys in a circus," Atticus said. After their disguises were complete, the three of them were finally ready to set off. Amelia pursed her lips, unsure how to interpret Atticus's words, while Remus's mouth twitched slightly. "Where do you live, Amelia?" "Oh, actually," Amelia began, her voice trailing off. The corners of her mouth tightened as she struggled to suppress her emotions. her strong self-control preventing her from losing her composure. Atticus smiled, attempting to comfort her. Some of my friends who used to sell goods mentioned it to me. It's okay. I know where it is. You made me look like Harry? Amelia asked, perhaps aware that her delicate appearance would draw attention. She darkened her skin, added freckles to her cheeks, shortened the bridge of her nose, and let her long hair fall loose, resembling messy dead grass. Taking a taxi was a relatively new and comfortable way for them to travel, and with their disguises in place, they were ready to navigate the bustling streets of New York. Atticus Blaine and Remus were on a journey. As they sat in the back seat of the car, Atticus turned to Amelia with a curious expression. He rolled his eyes but chose to remain silent, then glanced at Amelia. Her once stunning face had transformed into something more ordinary, which seemed to satisfy Atticus. Being the only local among them, Amelia was naturally expected to be their guide. Since none of them had visited this place before, they resorted to using simple means of transportation, like nomad taxis. Although the ride was slow, it allowed them to savor the city's scenery for the first time. After Amelia completed her disguise, she noticed Atticus fiddling with an air conditioner, directing its cool breeze into a water mirror floating nearby. He looked as if he had a toothache. It was considered impolite to inquire about someone's residence, yet Amelia's face remained stern. Despite this, she didn't mind sharing her story with Atticus. I graduated from IFA. After finishing school, I intended to move out, but my parents preferred I stay with them so they could see me every day. You have parents who love you very much, Atticus remarked, nodding slightly. Perhaps it was a topic close to his heart, as he soon lost interest in the conversation. In any wizard's enclave, the environment often clashed with the surrounding nomad world. The taxi carried them through New York's streets for over an hour before reaching Grafton Street. Unlike the pristine cityscape just 2 blocks away, the street where the Blind Pig Bar was located seemed neglected and dirty. Garbage and puddles littered the decaying roads, and the cold-toned buildings were plastered with faded advertisements and missing person notices. Tangled wires formed a cobweb overhead, enclosing the space. As they passed an old metal telephone pole, Remus noticed it had been corroded by rain and was on the verge of collapse. It's not quite the same style as ours, is it? Amelia, unfamiliar with the magical world, frowned at the sight. She couldn't believe wizards would choose to remain in such a dilapidated place. Remus, however, smiled and said cheerfully, "It's like the underground world deep in Nocturne Alley." Atticus nodded but didn't voice any agreement. He looked up at the top of an old-fashioned 6-story building beside them, where a rain shelter was supported by metal brackets. "Let's go," Atticus said, averting his gaze. "The bar should be at the other end of the street. We have to walk a little further." The trio moved slowly along the narrow, cluttered streets, enduring the stench of stagnant water pooled on the uneven ground. Atticus and Remus were accustomed to such conditions, having seen worse, but Amelia was not. With a doubtful expression, she suspected Atticus might have led them astray. When Atticus glanced up for the 4th time at the chaotic shelters of the buildings on either side, Remus finally became alert. He quickly scanned the awning above, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Is someone targeting us?" Amelia's arm trembled, and she instinctively reached for her wand. "Don't be nervous," Atticus reassured her with a smile. "It's not a wizard, I think. Perhaps just an overly curious cat." "A curious cat?" Amelia bit her lip, uncertain if he was joking, as she had noticed Atticus Blaine had a penchant for showing off his humor during their brief time together. Remus remained vigilant, having spent years in the underground world and understanding the behavior of its wizards. They were strangers to the local inhabitants, and the possibility of a wizard seeking a quick profit by attacking them couldn't be dismissed. The quiet streets amplified Amelia's unease. Suddenly, she realized Mr. Graves had mentioned that if she could keep an eye on Atticus Blaine, she might have the chance to become an Auror. However, she hadn't undergone any pre-job training whatsoever. The role of an Auror was far more perilous and vastly different from her work at Mandy's. "Here we are," Atticus announced, despite never having visited the place before. He stopped and faced a narrow, dimly lit alleyway. At its farthest end stood a wall covered in faded paint. "We're going in," he declared. Turning around, Atticus glanced up at a dark, vacant window across the street, its sash long gone. With a playful smile, he asked, "Want me to take you in for something to eat?" Suddenly, a cat's meow echoed from the shadowy window, causing both Remus and Amelia to widen their eyes in surprise. They hadn't expected Atticus to be serious. There really was a cat following them. As they stood there, astonished, a dark figure darted out from the window they had been watching. It moved with incredible speed, leaping and bounding across the tangled clotheslines like a bolt of lightning, before finally lunging at Atticus. End of this chapter. Chapter 890, Blind Pig Bar Attack. The blurry black shadow had not yet arrived, but the strong wind preceding it had already ruffled Amelia's hair. She trembled momentarily, instinctively reaching into her pocket for her wand. Her movements were sluggish compared to the shadow's swift approach, leaving her no time to cast a spell. Fortunately, Remus was far more experienced. While Amelia was still panicking at the shadow's sudden appearance, his hand had already grasped his wand. "Armor protection!" Remus shouted sharply. The air in front of the trio shimmered as an invisible barrier rapidly unfolded, stretching and expanding with the wind. The shadow, descending from the sky with remarkable agility, deftly evaded the barrier. It twisted midair, using its hind limbs to accelerate, brushing past Remus's ear like a gust of wind, and headed straight for Atticus Blaine, who was shielded behind him. "Damn!" Remus and Amelia exclaimed in unison, quickly turning to look at Atticus. To their surprise, they saw meow! It was indeed a cat. Its lustrous gray fur was speckled with irregular black spots, and its ears were larger than any cat Remus had ever seen. Most unusual was its tail, resembling a lion's, with a thick base tapering to a slender tip covered in short gray bristles. Contrary to their fears, the cat did not attack Atticus. Instead, it landed gracefully on his shoulder, sniffed his hair, and, seemingly satisfied, squatted down to lazily lick its paws. "This," Atticus began, but the cat, named Hobby, was already impatient. It playfully batted at Atticus's cheek, urging him to face the painted wall, and meowed insistently, prompting him to move quickly. "I guess it may have escaped from the Magical Beast Nature Reserve. Many wild magical animals have been lost recently. Atticus, you'd better stay away from it. This kind of animal is dangerous." Remus cautioned. "I think it likes me," Atticus replied, curling his lips. Under the watchful eyes of Remus and Amelia, he reached out to touch the soft gray fur on the cat's neck, rubbing it gently before revealing a brass tag. "Maybe it's because my hair color is similar to its coat." Amelia, initially stunned, regained her composure, though her tone remained surprised. "It's a catniv's." "You know this cat?" Atticus asked with a smile, looking at the gray feline. "Hobby." Amelia's face turned pale as she gasped, glancing at Atticus. The unexpected scene left Remus speechless for a moment. Finally, he looked at Atticus, who seemed torn between amusement and disbelief. Amelia resisted the urge to roll her eyes, feeling that the towering image of Atticus Blaine was crumbling in her mind. It was hard to reconcile this with the man who had saved 100,000 people at the Quidditch World Cup. Remus, however, was accustomed to such surprises. He scrutinized the gray cat, which was fatter than Hermione's Crookshanks, yet incredibly agile, and felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you think this cat might be an animagus?" Remus asked solemnly. "This is not a cat," Atticus replied. "Atticus?" Remus inquired, confirming his name. Meow, the gray cat, still licking its paws, heard the inquiry and meowed lazily. It then turned on Atticus's shoulder to gaze at the painted wall in the alley. "I think probably not," Atticus said with a smile. "I believe there wouldn't be such an arrogant animagus." Remus finally felt relieved. Atticus Blaine knew that although he sometimes acted impulsively, he was not foolish and would not take unnecessary risks. With this in mind, he tucked his wand away and followed Atticus into the alley. Amelia clearly wanted to remind them that since this nugget already had an owner, their responsibility was to return to Parliament, visit the Department of Magical Creatures to identify its owner, and then return it, rather than taking it into a place rumored to be less than reputable. The method of entering the Blind Pig Bar was not as complicated as Amelia had imagined. Atticus simply approached and knocked on the wall. Suddenly, a small window opened, revealing a pair of sinister eyes. The eyes merely glanced at them, and without a word, the wall, disguised as a red brick barrier, swung open. Before entering, Atticus seemed to remember something. He turned to Amelia, who appeared hesitant. "Have you never been to a place like this?" he asked. Amelia pursed her lips and shook her head sincerely. "Then I'll give you a piece of advice," Atticus said softly. "No matter what you see, don't make a fuss." The waiter who opened the door for them looked quite young, with a slightly pointed jaw and pale, gray skin. He overheard their conversation but paid no attention, his sinister red eyes fixated on the creature perched on Atticus's shoulder with great interest. "I'm sure." Remus then followed Atticus into the bar, while Amelia lingered outside the door. After the waiter returned to his duties, Remus whispered to Atticus, "That waiter is a vampire." However, this revelation was not particularly surprising once Remus observed the bar's patrons. The establishment was smaller than the famous Leaky Cauldron, but the atmosphere was far less inviting. The dimly lit bar was filled with lingering smoke, carrying the scent of wet socks burning on a stove. The smoke emanated from the pipes of wizards seated at various tables. Behind the bar, an elderly yet nimble house elf served drinks to the guests. The vampire waiter who had opened the door was responsible for delivering drinks, and he was not the only vampire present. By the window to the left of the door, two individuals in trenchcoats displayed obvious vampire traits. A female elf, clad in a seductive dress adorned with sparkling sequins, danced on a round table. Her graceful movements and captivating eyes left Remus astonished. "I've never seen goblins like this. I thought they were just—" Remus, who had dealt with fairies frequently, found himself at a loss for words to describe this enchanting creature. "There are many things you haven't seen before, boy," a bearded wizard shouted drunkenly as he bumped into Remus on his way to the bar. "Get out of the way. Don't block the path." Remus realized he was unaccustomed to the underground wizarding world's style. Suppressing his irritation, he stepped aside. "In my opinion, she might be a mix of goblin and wizard," Atticus remarked, glancing at the female elf with interest. A loud thud from a nearby table drew their attention. They turned to see a group of rough-looking men playing cards beneath an oil painting of gold galleons. One of them cursed, pulling galleons and sickles from his pocket, clearly having lost a bet. Among them was a werewolf, and most likely an original werewolf. Remus didn't need much to recognize his own kind. The original werewolves in the UK were mostly Greyback's followers, who had since become casualties of Atticus's actions. Yet, before this, Remus had rarely seen werewolves openly appear in public places, even within the underground world. They rarely linger. Werewolves, vampires, house elves, goblins, and wizards all gather here. The most astonishing presence, however, is the hybrid giant who occupies a corner booth by himself. Unlike Hagrid, who has more human-like features, this towering figure, nearly 7 or 8 feet tall, even while seated, would undoubtedly break through the roof if he stood. He resembles a pure giant more than anything else. It's remarkable to see so many different species coexisting peacefully in the same room. Even Remus finds himself in awe of the bar's owner, who has managed to create such a harmonious environment. End of this chapter. Chapter 891. Narlac Amelia was certain that 3 tables away from her, 2 wizards were engaged in a clandestine meeting. One of them had brought a poison horn, a Class B contraband, both rare and dangerous. Its rarity stemmed from the limited number of poison-horn beasts whose horns do not regenerate once lost. The danger lay in the fact that if mishandled, the deadly liquid within the horn could leak, causing an explosion powerful enough to overturn the entire bar. Amelia's eyes were fixed on the horn, her lips pale and cold sweat trickling down her forehead and back. Yet, the 2 individuals involved in the transaction seemed unfazed. The buyer tossed a bag of gold onto the table, and after verifying its contents, casually tucked the horn into his wizard's robe. Such perilous dealings were not uncommon in the bar's lobby. Amelia felt a wave of confusion and helplessness wash over her. Should she arrest these individuals on the spot or rush back to call for reinforcements? The Parliament was already on edge about the extremely dangerous magical creatures that had escaped from the Magical Creatures Nature Reserve. If these creatures entered the no-mage world, the consequences would be catastrophic. The wizards trading the poison horn could very well be poachers. The 2 men completed their transaction, clinked their glasses, drained the last of their drinks, and stood to leave. The buyer joined a card game at another table, while the seller, now in possession of the gold, made his way toward the door. As the criminal passed by her, Amelia swallowed nervously, her hand instinctively reaching into her pocket. "You should be glad your eyes are worthless, girl," the horn seller sneered as he passed. He cast a sinister glance at Amelia's hidden hand, then looked at her with malice, a wicked smile playing on his lips. "If they were worth a nut, I'd dig them out." The man's ferocity made Amelia tremble, and she nearly stepped back in panic, ready to draw her wand. "If I were you, I'd be low-key and humble." Just then, a cat that had followed Atticus Blaine into the bar leaped from his shoulders. It darted nimbly between the patron's feet, its ears perked up as if searching for something. The cat, named Hobie, briefly glanced at the horn, but quickly lost interest, moving on to eavesdrop elsewhere. Atticus watched the cat until he heard the arrogant words, then shifted his gaze and spoke slowly. "In case the gold I finally earned cannot be taken out of this bar." The trafficker grinned, ready to mock. He assumed this newcomer didn't understand the rules. No violence was tolerated in the Blind Pig Bar. Otherwise, the bar owner would unleash all his resources to hunt down the offender. But when the handsome young man with gray hair glanced at him with a casual air, the seller was momentarily stunned and then became compliant. "Sorry, sir," the vendor mumbled, hunching his shoulders and lowering his head. "Can I buy you and your friends a drink to apologize for my nonsense?" "Leave," Atticus said curtly, striding to an empty table. The vendor, relieved, bowed to Amelia, then quickly exited the bar, not straightening his hunched shoulders until he was outside. "What's going on?" Atticus Blaine and Remus were already seated when Amelia joined them, looking both puzzled and bewildered. "A wizard living in this environment must have a keen sense of smell," Remus remarked with a knowing smile. He whispered, "They can instantly tell who's new and who they should never cross." Amelia opened her mouth, struggling to comprehend why Atticus, who had completely altered his appearance yet still exuded a gentle aura, was considered formidable. No, this wasn't something she needed to worry about right now. Her gaze shifted to the bustling bar, a notorious den of criminals. Its infamy was such that even young wizards had heard of it. Surely, the security department was aware of its existence, so why did the Aurors allow it to persist? "What are you here to find out?" Remus asked, well aware that Atticus wouldn't visit this place, out of mere curiosity. There had to be a purpose, most likely to gather information. "Of course, I want to hear what the owner of this bar thinks of Graves," Atticus replied, sipping his sherry with a smile. "He's the one we urgently need to know about, isn't he? I heard in Europe that the owner of the Blind Pig Bar knows everything happening in New York, and his information is even better than that of the Magical Congress. It seems he's not here, so we might have to wait a bit longer." Amelia's lips twitched. She didn't quite agree with the rumors Atticus had heard. No one in this land had richer information channels than Congress, and if he wanted to know about Mr. Graves, he could have asked her, right? But she remained silent, curious to see the person running this criminal den. As Atticus had predicted, they didn't encounter the mysterious owner all day. To pass the time, Atticus tried his luck at a gambling table, winning several dozen galleons. He generously treated everyone at the table to a drink before stepping away. Remus, meanwhile, befriended the tipsy wizard who had bumped into him earlier, sharing a glass of fire whiskey and learning many intriguing stories about New York. Hobie, who had accompanied Atticus, darted around before settling on a beam, listening intently to the conversations below. Amelia, however, sat uneasily, resisting the urge to return to the security department and report to Mr. Graves, feeling increasingly anxious. The bar's clientele shifted throughout the day. As the neon lights from the No-Maj world flickered through the greasy windows, a figure suddenly apparated beside the bar. It was a goblin, seemingly in the prime of life, which, given the goblin's extended lifespans, meant he was at least 100 years old. Unlike the other patrons or magical creatures in the bar, he was dressed like a Gringotts elite, in a sharp suit and bow tie, a lit cigar held between his long fingers. After spending nearly a day in the bar, Amelia witnessed someone apparate directly inside for the first time. This quickly revealed the identity of the shrewd goblin with a cunning glint in his eyes. Narlac, the owner of the Blind Pig Bar and a prominent figure in the underground wizarding world of the United States. With the air of a king surveying his kingdom, Narlac cast a proud glance around his bar. Satisfied that everything was in order, he took a long drag from his cigar, exhaling a smoke ring into the air. Hobie, who had been dozing, stirred at the sight. Atticus Blaine squinted at the rafters, his eyes coming to life the moment Narlac appeared. The creature purred, leaped gracefully, and landed on Atticus's shoulder once more. This action successfully drew the goblin's attention to the trio of Atticus figures. End of this chapter. Chapter 892, Being Smart. Narlac's eyes fell on Hobie, and he smacked his lips. Judging by his eager gaze, he was clearly intrigued by the strikingly beautiful cat perched on Atticus Blaine's shoulder. Seizing the moment, he glanced at the trio seated at the table. A handsome young man with hair the same shade as the cat's fur caught his attention. Narlac sniffed the air, confirming Remus's true identity. The last member of the group, a young witch, glared at him with hostility, her scent betraying her emotions. A stench of the Magic Congress, a naive youth. Interesting. Narlac took a deep drag from his cigar, exhaling a large cloud of blue, pungent smoke. He noticed that the three had concealed their true appearances. Crunch, crunch. The goblin held the cigar in his mouth, grabbed a glass of beer from the bar, and slowly approached, dragging a chair behind him. As the well-informed goblin observed them, the trio was also scrutinizing Narlac. When he approached, Remus shifted his stool closer to Amelia, making room for him. Upon reaching the table, Narlac nodded to Remus in gratitude, then settled into the chair he had brought, placing his beer on the table. After taking a deep breath of cigar smoke, he nodded elegantly to Atticus. "I'm honored to have you in our establishment, Mr. Blaine." Even seasoned wizards like Remus, who had spent years in the magical world, felt a slight quickening of their hearts at this moment, let alone an inexperienced young woman like Amelia. Atticus smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying anything. He simply raised his glass towards Narlac and took a sip. Ding! The glass was set down, and Atticus surveyed the bar where he had spent the day, smiling slightly. "It's nice here." Narlac leaned forward, removed the cigar from his mouth, and smiled. "Thank you for the compliment. I aim to provide a refuge from the storm for those less fortunate, and perhaps make a little profit along the way." "So," Narlac glanced at Hobie again, his ears perked. "How can I assist you, Mr. Blaine?" "Let me guess, a proper legal wand with the Wand Licensing Office procedures." Amelia's lips tightened, her brown eyes sharp. She disagreed with Mr. Graves confiscating Atticus's wand, but if the goblin dared to sell wands with fake documents, she vowed to see him jailed. Atticus picked up his glass again, downed the remaining wine, and exhaled softly. After glancing at the table's remnants, he reached into his pocket. Under Narlac's sly gaze, he produced a handful of galleons. 10 gold coins, as large as hubcaps, gleamed enticingly under the dim light and swirling smoke. But Narlac merely glanced at the coins, then looked away, shaking his head with a shrewd smile. "This is not a wand shop, Mr. Blaine, and if you want something completely legal—" "I think you misunderstood, Narlac," Atticus said calmly. "That's what we spent in this pub today. I believe it's more than enough to cover our expenses. By the way, your elf is an excellent cook, and I loved the sandwiches." With that, Atticus picked up his coat from the back of the chair and nodded to the stunned Remus and Amelia. "Let's go. We should head back." Narlac's eyes narrowed, his square green face darkening slightly. He extinguished his cigar on the plate on the table and called out to Atticus and the others just before they exited the bar. "Wait." "What is it?" Hobie, perched on Atticus' shoulder, tightened his grip around Atticus' neck with his forelimbs, clearly sensing the tension. Atticus Blaine didn't want to leave. He gently pushed away Hobie's paws and turned his head to look at Narlac with a calm demeanor. After a moment of contemplation, Narlac stood up and snapped his fingers. Instantly, the leftovers on the table vanished. "You and your friends have traveled a long way. Wouldn't it be an honor for me to treat you to a drink?" Narlac offered. Atticus smiled. "Oh, and there's no charge? I see no reason to refuse." Would the renowned Atticus Blaine be swayed by a few complimentary drinks? Even Remus and Amelia, who had only known him for 2 days, wouldn't believe it. Yet they were genuinely puzzled, unsure of Atticus's intentions. The trio settled back into their seats as Narlac signaled to the bar, prompting the elf behind it to spring into action. Knock, knock. There was a knock at the bar's door. When it opened, a man in a black trench coat and round hat entered, carrying a suitcase. Narlac gave the newcomer a quick glance before losing interest. In contrast, Atticus raised an eyebrow, surprised to see the man with an Asian face. The man lingered near the entrance, his unease suggesting it was his first visit to this unfamiliar bar. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on a table by the window on the left, where two young men, much like Atticus and his companions, sat. Relieved, the man exhaled. The two young men stood up as soon as they noticed him. They tossed a few gold coins onto the table and headed for the door. The three of them left the bar in silent agreement. The man had barely been inside for half a minute, likely intending to conduct a trade, but finding the bar's environment insufficiently secure. Atticus felt reassured. This was a common practice. In the past, high-value trades in the underground world of Nocturne Alley often took place in the maze-like alleys rather than in public spaces. So, as you can see, Narlac began, unfazed by Atticus's interest in the ordinary guests. He pulled a cigar from his suit's inner pocket, snapped his fingers, and lit it. I'm a businessman, Mr. Blaine. If you want something from me, you have to offer something in return. Atticus leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced on his knee, and smiled. If it were old Barna, you wouldn't suggest something as foolish as getting me a wand in this situation. You know there's a Congress employee tailing me, and you said that because you're afraid the Minister of Security might not find an excuse to deport me. Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed you might adjust this young lady's memory after obtaining the wand. From what I've heard from my European contacts, Atticus Blaine isn't exactly a rule-abiding wizard. Narlac grinned, continuing. Yes, I understand, that Graves from the security department. I recall that 70 years ago, there was a Percival Graves in that position. He was impersonated, and he stepped down due to the scandal. Quite the scandal, indeed. That imposter caused a lot of trouble. I heard you visited him recently, right? So what do you want me to do to help you pass the review meeting in a week? You've managed to keep this bar here without the Magic Congress seizing it. Atticus twirled his thumbs, asking calmly. I imagine that required considerable effort over the years, didn't it? Narlac's dark green eyes gleamed with cunning. You want to know how much gold I spent on those greedy wizards? Oh no, this is a business secret. I can't trade it. Although he declined, Atticus Blaine understood that this cunning goblin was merely trying to entice him. No matter how much gold you offer, that's not my concern. Narlac, my friends and I have come to New York for business. There's no way I could risk offending all the influential people here before we've even begun, Atticus explained. You seem to know Track Graves quite well. Tell me about him. If I find the information valuable, I will pay a price that satisfies you. End of this chapter. Chapter 893, Breaking Point. Track Graves. Yes, he is as upright as he is intolerant of evil. A difficult man to contend with. Narlac grinned, resembling a shrewd businessman. The most challenging individuals are those without desires or demands. However, if Atticus Blaine wants something, there will be no problem. Narlac knew that a wizard like Blaine would never lack wealth. Perhaps you don't know that he is the grandson of Percival Graves. To cleanse his grandfather's shame, he joined the Ministry of Security, worked tirelessly, and eventually became the minister of the Ministry of Security with his family's support, Narlac said, puffing on his cigar. His square green face loomed behind the swirling smoke. Percival Graves. Amelia knew that this man had once been involved with the Ministry of Security. The sinful goblin had just mentioned this. She also knew there had been an incident during Percival's tenure, but the details were scarce. Amelia glanced at Atticus, deducing from Narlac's words that Atticus knew more about the inside story. Atticus remained silent, observing Narlac calmly. He understood why the goblin was sharing this information. In both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds, those at the top prioritize interests above all else. Schemes and strategies revolve around these interests. Atticus had successfully convinced Vip Dregern to serve as Durmstrang's principal because he understood this well. He wasn't surprised that Remus faced challenges promoting his business in the Americas. Initially, he thought officials wanted a share of the market for his learning machine. However, he soon realized there might be other reasons. Atticus knew that track graves was their biggest obstacle, but he was uncertain about what this powerful figure in the Magic Congress of the United States was thinking. It certainly wasn't about gold. Typically, an official with a strong background and great ambitions is difficult to threaten or bribe. Exchanging interests with such a person is challenging, but the confident look on the goblin's face suggested he knew something. Narlac seemed to have finished speaking and was enjoying a cup of red wine. Atticus knew that if he wanted more valuable information, he needed to pay first. The dull sound of the money bag hitting the table indicated that Atticus was not stingy with his gold and was indeed sincere. Narlac noticed the generous reward provided by Atticus Blaine. Its eyes lingered on the money bag for a moment, but it restrained its greed. "Oh, it seems that being a professor at Hogwarts is indeed a good job, Mr. Blaine," Narlac remarked. Atticus immediately understood that the old goblin wanted more, but he didn't offer additional payment. Instead, he picked up his glass and took a sip of the Wangyo water offered by the house elf, a particularly spicy drink reminiscent of white wine. It made Atticus want to cough, having not touched white wine for many years. "Since you are not satisfied, Narlac," Atticus put down his glass silently, "how about you evaluate for yourself how much gold the information you're about to share is worth?" Facing a world-renowned magician, even a goblin had to maintain basic respect. Narlac didn't attempt to inflate the price with words. He placed the unburned cigar on the ashtray and stood up, raising a long finger. 10,000 galleons! Remus couldn't hold back any longer. His brows furrowed, and there was a hint of anger in his tone. "I dare say you are the greediest goblin I have ever seen." "Oh," Narlac replied, unperturbed. "That's not very objective, Mr. Lupin," Narlac remarked, his gaze fixed on Remus with a hint of disdain. He continued, "If it weren't for Atticus Blaine, you'd realize that the goblins you're dealing with are far greedier than I am. And I never said I wanted 10,000 galleons. What I meant was—" Narlac's eyes shifted back to Atticus. "To be honest, Mr. Blaine, I'm not in need of gold. With a long life and talents in construction and business, goblins are wealthier than most wizards. What intrigues me more than gall, is novelty." Atticus raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "You greedy fellow, are you trying to get a learning machine from us?" "Wishful thinking," Remus exclaimed, initially startled, his expression turning grim. The price of a learning machine in Europe was set at 50,000 galleons by Atticus himself. At the time of pricing, not only Remus but even the goblins criticized it as exorbitant. Yet, once introduced to the market, the machines became immensely popular. Many ancient pureblood families, obscure magical schools, and industry giants were willing to pay handsomely to provide preschool education for their descendants. As Atticus had predicted, those willing to spend 10 or 20,000 galleons didn't mind paying tens of thousands more. The American market was a new frontier they aimed to conquer. After accounting for tariffs, transportation, and labor costs, Atticus decided to set the price around 45,000 galleons. However, it was anticipated that due to production constraints, the black market price would exceed the European selling price once the machines were available. If the learning machine were banned, the black market price would skyrocket even further. The issue wasn't the inflated price, but whether Narlac could offer sufficient returns. Atticus's eyes gleamed as he smiled. "I must admit, this offer exceeds my expectations. For me to consider it, Narlac, you'll need to provide information of substantial value." Narlac, sensing the deal was within reach, grinned, revealing his yellowed teeth. Suppressing his excitement, he began. "Just 8 years ago, Graves was merely a senior auror, not yet the director of security. A group of vampires was wreaking havoc in the Muggle world, breaking laws, killing many nomads, and causing chaos. Graves was tasked with capturing them. The vampires resisted fiercely, wielding some mysterious power, and killed many aurors. Even Graves was gravely injured. However, he eventually prevailed and quelled the storm." Atticus narrowed his eyes, recalling vague memories of the incident which had been reported by the Daily Prophet. In that final duel, Graves was severely injured, spending nearly half a year in the hospital. The then Minister of Security was dismissed due to the incident, leaving the position vacant for 6 months. Eventually, Graves was appointed Minister of Security, thanks to his merits. His series of political achievements and arrests soon overshadowed his near-fatal injuries, leading people to believe he had fully recovered. But, under the intense scrutiny of the three, Narlac smiled with pride, ready to reveal more. Few people know that in the years that followed, Graves had been secretly undergoing treatment. A few years ago, he even discreetly visited St. Mungo's for help, but it seemed to have little effect. He continued to purchase potions on the black market in secret until last year. Until last year? Remus asked instinctively. Did he manage to solve his problem? Who knows? Narlac replied, crossing his legs and leaning back in his chair. But I think it's unlikely. He's clearly been afflicted by some vicious black magic. The damage caused by such magic is typically irreversible. Narlac observed Atticus Blaine, who appeared deep in thought, and smiled comfortably with a cigar in his mouth. I heard you're quite skilled in healing, Mr. Blaine. If the rumors are true that you and Albus Dumbledore teamed up to cure the wizard couple driven mad by the Cruciatus curse, then perhaps you could help Graves. End of this chapter. Chapter 894, An Unexpected Turn. After listening to the information provided by Narlac, Atticus Blaine, Amelia, and Remus sat in contemplative silence. Amelia's brow furrowed with skepticism as she surveyed the bar around them, a place teeming with illicit activities and shady dealings. Many of the patrons bore familiar faces, individuals she recognized as being under surveillance by the security department. They were criminals in dire need of capture, and the goblin who ran this establishment was no less culpable. How trustworthy could Narlac's words be? Amelia's doubts were compounded by her experiences since joining the Magic Congress less than a year ago. She had heard of Mr. Graves personally apprehending several dangerous criminals, a testament to his formidable prowess as a wizard. If he were truly suffering from severe health issues, as Narlac claimed, how could he maintain such capabilities? Moreover, she had interacted closely with Mr. Graves just the previous night and had noticed nothing amiss. In contrast, Remus, who was well-versed in the underground wizarding world, understood the tactics of information brokers like Narlac. He was inclined to believe the goblin's information, but questioned its current relevance. Narlac had mentioned that Graves had ceased purchasing potions from the black market, leaving it uncertain whether Graves had been cured. Even if he hadn't, could Atticus resolve his predicament? Remus recalled Sirius recounting the unique recovery of Frank and Alice, but it was unclear if Atticus possessed similar expertise in healing. When did he stop buying potions from the black market? Atticus inquired after a moment of thought. Around October last year, Narlac replied with a shrug. The potion seller complained to me when he visited my bar for a drink last Christmas. He was missing a steady income. What do you think, Atticus? Remus asked softly. It's hard to say, Atticus mused, his mind racing. If there's a dark magic that could trouble a wizard like Graves for 7 or 8 years, it's likely that the damage is irreversible. I suspect he's found a more effective way to suppress it. But to understand the situation fully, I need to see him myself. Turning to Narlac, Atticus asked, what potion did he buy from the black market before? Narlac, as if anticipating the question, tapped the ash from his cigarette into an ashtray and grinned slyly at Atticus. That's another transaction, Mr. Blaine. Remus frowned, ready to interject, but Atticus raised a hand, maintaining his composure. What do you want? Doing business with you has been more pleasant than I expected, Mr. Blaine, Narlac said, baring his yellowed teeth in a greedy smile. His gaze shifted to Hobie, the creature perched on Atticus's shoulder. This is a cat, isn't it? Mr. Blaine, this little guy is quite fast, isn't it? And I've heard that such creatures are very intelligent and can be quite useful if properly tamed. You want it? Atticus raised an eyebrow, his tone questioning yet unsurprised. He glanced at Hobie, about to speak, but Hobie leaped from his shoulder to Narlac's, settling there lazily. Oh, Narlac exclaimed, genuinely surprised. I didn't expect you to be skilled in taming magical animals, Mr. Blaine. Shall we make a deal? Tell me, Atticus said, casting a meaningful glance at Hobie, who avoided his gaze. At that moment, Atticus realized why the creature had appeared and what its true intentions were. From the start, its target had likely been Narlac. Cleaning elixir, Narlac said with a sly smile. This potion wasn't found in standard textbooks or even in most books that covered obscure potions. Remus, who wasn't particularly skilled in potion making, looked bewildered. Amelia, standing beside him, shared his confusion. However, after a brief moment of surprise, her expression turned icy. "This is complete nonsense, Goblin," she snapped. "Just because you framed Makusa and the Minister of Security, I could arrest you right now." Narlac, unfazed by Amelia's threat, ignored her completely. Why? He knew his dealings with Atticus Blaine had reached their conclusion. Rising slowly, he nodded respectfully towards Atticus. "I haven't properly welcomed you yet, Mr. Blaine. I hope you enjoy your stay in New York. As for the learning machine, you can send it here before you leave the city." With that, Narlac took a glass of wine from a passing waiter's tray and smoothly transitioned into a conversation with guests at another table. "What is the elixir?" Remus asked, glancing at Amelia, who was still glaring at Narlac. He then turned to Atticus for an explanation. "It's a magical potion highly effective against curses, but its use has been banned by the magical civilizations that invented it," Atticus explained, his expression uncertain. "Why?" Remus asked, puzzled. "It sounds beneficial, doesn't it?" Atticus smiled knowingly. During his years in the underground world, potion processing had been one of his main trades. He was well acquainted with various banned potions. One of the ingredients is unicorn blood. Hunting unicorns is strictly forbidden in any magical civilization. Moreover, drinking unicorn blood is extremely dangerous. Even if you use various ingredients to neutralize it, you can't completely eliminate its toxicity. It's like trading one curse for another. Remus was stunned. If this was true, then Graves was in serious trouble. The mere exposure of this matter could ruin him. But Atticus was contemplating other aspects. This type of cleansing potion was highly addictive. Once consumed, a person could no longer live without it, gradually weakening under its torment until they became neither human nor ghost. So how had Graves managed to escape this fate? Using this incident to threaten Graves was no longer an option for Atticus. The Graves family had deep roots, being among the first 12 founders of the Magical Congress of the United States of America. Many family members held key positions in Congress, making it difficult to leverage this against Truck Graves. A more practical approach would be to solve the problem Graves faced, but a black magic affliction requiring a cleansing agent couldn't be eradicated with mere words. Atticus searched his memory, suddenly standing up as if sensing something. His face grew solemn, and his piercing gaze seemed to penetrate the bar's outer wall. "What's wrong, Atticus?" Remus and Amelia, who had been watching him closely, immediately stood up. Remus had barely finished speaking when, boom, a blinding flash of fire burst through the greasy window sash, illuminating the dim room. The deafening roar drowned out all the noise in the bar. The shockwave shattered the glass windows of the Blind Pig bar, triggering a cascade of screams. Gas lamps overhead and bottles on the shelves behind the bar crashed to the floor amidst the chaos. People feared that the Magic Congress had made a decisive move. The decision to liquidate the place had been made, and an attack was launched. The attackers no longer concerned themselves with Narlac. In their panic, they collided with tables and hastily apparated away. Even the terrified giant, in a desperate bid for escape, crashed through the wall. In the blink of an eye, the once peaceful Blind Pig bar descended into chaos. End of chapter. Chapter 895. The Poison Leopard. The sudden commotion left Narlac bewildered. For a fleeting moment, it believed that the security department had finally come to seize its lair. Hobie, perched on Narlac's shoulder, reacted swiftly. He leaped into the air, narrowly avoiding the shards of glass hurled in his direction. Before the gust of wind subsided, he darted through the shattered window frame, vanishing into the endless night like an arrow. "Atticus!" Remus shouted amidst the chaos, his voice barely audible over the clatter. "Let's get out of here first and talk later." Atticus Blaine reached out, grasping both Remus and Amelia. In an instant, the trio found themselves atop the roof of an old 6-story building flanking the alley where the Blind Pig bar was located. The night, dimly lit by neon lights, revealed a block away a brick-shaped building engulfed in flames. One corner of the roof had collapsed, sending bricks and glass cascading like rain. On the lower floors, brightly lit windows framed scenes of frantic escape, and the distant screams of nomise echoed across the bustling street. Compared to the mundane and mechanical tasks of office work, Amelia was unprepared for the devastation before her. The young witch, fresh out of magic school, was momentarily speechless, unsure of how to respond. Remus, though not unfamiliar with dramatic scenes, was equally taken aback. However, he quickly regained his composure and cast a hesitant glance at Atticus. The scale of the destruction suggested that this was no minor incident, and it was clearly linked to magic. Involving themselves in such matters, especially in a foreign country, could be problematic for the Magical Congress of the United States of America. "Let's go take a look," Atticus said calmly and decisively. He apparated with Remus and Amelia, reappearing atop a building hundreds of feet high. The howling wind carried an air of urgency. Just a step away lay a massive crater, the result of the recent explosion. The blast had obliterated the top 2 floors of the office building at one corner. Amidst the debris, at least a dozen no-maj bodies lay buried beneath the rubble. The impact had caused cracks to snake through the 5- and 6-story buildings. Amidst the roaring flames, electric sparks crackled intermittently, and the severed limbs of the no-majs were consumed by the fire. The sight turned Amelia's face pale, and she covered her mouth in disbelief. No wizards had perished here, Atticus quickly confirmed, which surprised him. The chaos had been deafening, yet the wizard responsible had managed to survive such an explosion. Clearly, they were quite skilled. It was evident that the troublemaker had disapparated, leaving behind only the violent explosion to erase their traces. However, Atticus sensed something. On one side of the bustling street, high-rise buildings stood shoulder to shoulder. Atticus focused his sharp gaze into the distance, sensing something rapidly moving away from him, miles away. Given that less than 2 minutes had passed since the explosion, the speed of the creature was astonishing. "Draw your wand," Atticus instructed Amelia, not needing Remus's reminder. "What we're about to encounter won't be very friendly." Amelia hesitated for a moment before nodding and quickly retrieving her wand from her pocket. Remus cast a worried glance at Atticus. If they were in England and Atticus had a wand in hand, he would never hesitate to prevent the disaster from spreading. Remus sighed inwardly, his expression tightening as he gripped his wand more firmly. Atticus Blaine could only transport 2 people at a time to wherever he could see, and in the blink of an eye, he had appeared 4 or 5 times. The rapid succession of teleportations left his companions feeling queasy. The row of buildings on the street gave way to a train track that cut through the city. Atticus paused at the edge of the last building, squinting as he assessed the situation, before leading Remus and Amelia onto the elevated railway, finally catching up with the queue, Elprit. The creature seemed to defy inertia. The moment it sensed someone blocking its path, it halted abruptly, like a bolt of lightning frozen mid-strike, and glared fiercely at the trio. As Remus locked eyes with the ferocious beast, he instinctively took a half-step back, despite his resolve to protect Atticus. Though he quickly moved in front of Atticus, wand raised defensively, his initial fear was evident. Amelia fared worse. Her entire body trembled, her lips pale, and her once clear brown eyes now clouded with fear. The magical beast confronting them was marked with red and black circular patterns, its body bristling with sharp thorns. A swollen ring around its neck pulsed with a red glow, resembling a lion's mane. The beast's powerful limbs were anchored to the ground, its massive body crouched, while its thick, spiked tail was poised to strike. In the midst of the howling wind, Remus could hear his own breathing. He wished fervently for a full moon, thinking that as a werewolf, he might not feel the rational urge to retreat. "Poisonous leopard," Remus managed to say, his voice strained. This creature, defined by magical animal experts as dangerous as a fire dragon, was rated 5X. The venomous leopard before them was larger than half the size of an African lion, clearly an adult. Most concerning was the foot-long stripe on its shoulder, a vicious wound with flesh turned outward and blood seeping from it. A wounded beast is often the most perilous. "I'm afraid I can't handle it, Atticus," Remus said through gritted teeth, implying that retreat was the wisest course of action. "We can't retreat," Amelia suddenly shouted, her voice trembling. "We have to hold it here, or it will cause more damage to the city." Remus glanced at Amelia, frowning. Strictly speaking, she wasn't wrong. Her determination was admirable, but it conflicted with their immediate safety. However, the poisonous leopard wouldn't wait for them to reach a consensus. It had been hunted by wizards in its homeland, caged, and transported across the ocean to an alien land. Just moments ago, a wizard had attempted to kill it, and now it was consumed by rage. Brown saliva dripped from its cracked fangs, sizzling as it hit the railway sleepers, releasing a foul white smoke that quickly dispersed in the wind. Seeing this, Remus knew they had to act swiftly. Remus and Amelia's expressions shifted dramatically. Had they not been positioned upwind, the toxic fumes would have spelled disaster for them. The poison leopard's dark eyes glinted with a menacing red light as it fixated on the three wizards before it. Its limbs and claws dug into the ground, poised for attack. A chilling aura emanated from the creature, and suddenly, the telephone poles flanking the railway crackled with electricity. Blinding bolts of lightning struck its sides, as if it were a mythical beast commanding the very thunder itself. The palpable sense of impending doom gripped Remus and Amelia, leaving them paralyzed with fear. Remus pressed his lips together, casting a glance at Atticus Blaine. "Keep it contained for now, Remus. I'll support you and maintain our formation. We need to hold out until the Aurors from the security department arrive to take control," Atticus instructed calmly. He knew they couldn't allow such a perilous level 5X magical creature to roam freely in Muggle territory. End of this chapter. Chapter 896, Fierce Battle. In the dense jungle, the beasts possess a keener intuition than wizards, especially the poisonous leopards that reign at the top of the food chain. Among the three wizards standing before it, the malevolent gleam in its dark eyes was fixated on the gray-haired wizard without a wand. In its perception, the figure standing behind was the most dangerous. The area enveloped by whip-like electric light gradually expanded, inching closer to the trio, including Atticus Blaine. Remus swallowed hard, pushing all distracting thoughts from his mind. Since Atticus had vowed to stop the poisonous leopard here, he had to trust him. He didn't expect Amelia to assist, but Atticus's promise to support the formation gave him a slight sense of reassurance. Finally, the poisonous leopard slowly raised its forelimbs and began to advance. Even Remus, tense as he was, had to admit the creature's graceful stride. Yet, this fleeting thought was quickly shattered by the weight of the impending threat. The venomous leopard, drawing nearer, stepped on the gravel supporting the sleepers with its thickly padded paws. The stones crunched and shifted, producing a sound akin to a heavy hammer striking limestone. The psychological pressure on Remus and Amelia intensified, their breathing growing more rapid. Especially for Amelia, facing a magical creature as dangerous as a fire dragon, in a completely hostile state, was beyond what a young wizard fresh out of school could endure. Suddenly, Amelia's white cheeks glistened with sweat, her wrist trembling violently. A cluster of orange-red cursed light flashed in the dark night, shooting forward like an arrow, and exploded on the train track's bed. The burst of light momentarily confused Remus, but he quickly regained his senses, thinking, "Oh no!" The poisonous leopard had vanished like a wisp of smoke. Simultaneously, the telephone poles lining the driveway erupted with bright sparks. "Move quickly!" Remus, seasoned by wars and his time in the underground world, had brushed against death many times. The instant he lost sight of the target, his experience kicked in, allowing him to make a swift judgment. He shouted urgently, phantoming away to safety. His primary concern was to alert Amelia, trusting that Atticus would make the right call. Amelia, momentarily stunned by the attack, was jolted back to reality by Remus's warning. With no time to spare, as her body was enveloped by the twisting space, a thick claw descended from above, barely grazing her flowing hair. Boom! The three wizards flashed in different directions, and as they reappeared, violent airwaves with rumbling sounds pursued them relentlessly. "Armor protection!" Remus bellowed, narrowly erecting an iron armor barrier to block the bullet-like gravel and the tsunami-like wind. Amidst the fishy wind and rain, Remus held up the barrier, straining to hear the voices of Atticus and Amelia. The storm, mixed with debris, tore down more power lines. For a moment, This section of the railway resembled a stormy sea, with wind, rain, thunder, and lightning raging. The uncontrollable panic drove Amelia further from the battlefield. Though the wind's lethality diminished here, the stones that struck her still elicited painful groans, causing her to stagger. Atticus Blaine took a step back, but his foot slipped, causing him to tumble onto the tracks. As his hand made contact with the deformed rails, a sharp crack echoed and white electric sparks erupted. Amelia let out a sob, rolling to the side and clutching her scorched arms. In today's world, basic spells and wandless magic were second nature to Atticus. Like Remus, he used his protective charm to shield himself from the storm of debris. Suddenly, Amelia's voice reached his ears, filled with pain. He glanced in her direction, his brows knitting together. His previously calm demeanor wavered. In duels between young wizards, each participant takes turns, but in life-and-death battles there is no such luxury. A single missed strike, and the venomous leopard vanishes, head reappearing atop a telegraph pole swaying in the wind. Its cold eyes ignored Remus and Amelia, focusing instead on Atticus, the greatest threat. The venomous leopard moved with the speed of a ghost, its limbs barely touching the telegraph pole before it appeared beside Atticus. For a brief moment, their eyes met in a frozen gaze. The leopard extended its front paw, its razor-sharp claws reaching for Atticus's neck, anticipating an easy kill. Yet, Atticus remained composed. Before the leopard's claws could touch him, he was enveloped in a swirl of distorted space, landing on the opposite railing in the blink of an eye. The leopard's failed attacks only fueled its rage, its dark pupils burning with fierce anger. Amelia, having fallen again, lay on the cold track bed, her arm throbbing with pain. She struggled to prop herself up on her elbows, her eyes drawn to 100 feet away where a scene unfolded that she would never forget. A streak of reddish-brown lightning darted along the railway, its form barely visible as it moved with jaw-dropping speed and power, creating chaos in its wake. The venomous leopard pursued Atticus Blaine, but it couldn't catch him. He never stayed in one place for more than a fraction of a second, constantly shifting locations. In the stormy, ash-filled air, it seemed as if there were a dozen Atticus Blaines. Could apparition be used like this? Was he even a wizard? Amelia nearly dropped her wand in shock. While apparition was a skill any competent wizard could learn, she had never imagined it could be used to such an extent. She stared in awe at the many forms of Atticus, marveling at his resilience and power. Remus, who thought he understood Atticus's abilities, found himself surprised by the display. Even in the Blind Pig Bar, known for its bold patrons, few could have anticipated such a spectacle. Nearby, a group of opportunists lingered, hoping to profit from the unfolding events. Their attention was soon drawn to the commotion on the elevated train track. One by one, they appeared, concealed by the disillusionment charm. As they realized the source of the disturbance and recognized the fleeting silhouette amidst the storm, they froze in place, as if struck by a petrification spell. Their faces contorted into expressions of disbelief and amusement. "That's insane!" one whispered. "Is that even humanly possible?" another murmured incredulously. The dense forest around them rustled with hushed conversations, and some, fearing the wrath of Atticus Blaine, fled in panic. They worried that their unauthorized spying might provoke his ire, especially after he had just dealt with the venomous leopard. Roar! The stalemate lasted for about 2 minutes before the enraged leopard could no longer contain itself. It ceased its futile chase and let out a thunderous roar. Then, boom, it struck the twisted railway track in frustration. The battered bridge, already weakened, could no longer withstand the pressure. With a final, resounding crash, the section of the bridge, spanning over 100 feet, plummeted to the ground. End of this chapter. Chapter 897, Entanglement. Dozens of tons of steel, concrete, and soil crashed to the ground 30 feet below like an avalanche. The billowing smoke and dust quickly spread, and the dull roar sent shivers through the onlookers. Although the railway bridge deck had collapsed, most of the supporting stone piers remained intact. The venomous leopard crouched on one of these piers, panting slightly. Its red and black striped bristles glistened under the dim moonlight, a testament to the toll Atticus Blaine's relentless pursuit had taken on it. Atticus stood at the edge of the broken bridge, gently rubbing his temples as a wave of nausea washed over him. The frequent apparitions had left him feeling queasy, but after a few deep breaths, he managed to regain his composure, though his face was slightly pale. He locked eyes with the venomous leopard, which glared back at him with ferocity. "Would you like to calm down for a moment?" Atticus asked sincerely, hoping the creature would cease its frenzy. However, Atticus was no expert in magical creatures, and his words only seemed to provoke the venomous leopard further. The sharp thorns on its back quivered, and the red collar around its neck glowed intensely, becoming the most vivid sight in the chaotic night. The venomous leopard let out a scream that belied its massive muscular form, a high-pitched, sharp cry reminiscent of a bird ensnared by a snake. The sound echoed through the night, adding to the chaos. Then the creature coiled its body, its cheetah-like head facing Atticus. In the next instant, its jaws parted, and something ominous brewed in its throat. "Watch out, Atticus!" Remus shouted, bewildered by the turn of events. Atticus had initially planned for Remus to distract the venomous leopard until the Max Security Department could send reinforcements. However, the situation had escalated. The venomous leopard focused intently on Atticus, ignoring the wandless wizard to buy time for the two wizards with wands. When Atticus had been engaged with the venomous leopard, Remus had wanted to assist, but the speed of both man and beast was too great for him to find an opening. Despite this, Remus remained vigilant. As soon as he sensed the impending attack, he sprinted towards Atticus. At that moment, the venomous leopard completed its charge. Its pitch-black pupils flared, and a torrent of solid red smoke erupted from its throat, hurtling towards Atticus and Remus. Known for its exceptional speed and strength, even among high-risk magical creatures, the venomous leopard's attack was as potent as its reputation suggested. Remus swiftly wielded his wand, conjuring a furious hurricane that scattered the smoke column. The spinning tornado sucked up the poisonous fumes, carrying them high into the sky. Atticus frowned at the sight. "This won't work, Remus. The smoke is highly toxic. If it disperses into the air, nearby muggles could suffer from severe nausea for days or fall into a coma for weeks," Atticus warned. "But this is all I can do, Atticus," Remus shouted over the howling wind, his voice tinged with desperation. Atticus's mouth twitched slightly. With a clear snap of his fingers, a small golden flame appeared on his raised right hand. Another, their faces etched with urgency. The situation had escalated beyond a mere magical confrontation. It was now a matter of life and death for countless innocents. Atticus Blaine, standing amidst the chaos, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The small flame he had conjured earlier had proven effective against the poison leopard, but now a new challenge loomed. The train, a massive steel beast, was barreling towards them, its whistle a desperate cry for help. "Remus, we need to act fast," Atticus shouted, his voice cutting through the din. The air was thick with tension, the acrid scent of burnt smoke mingling with the cool night breeze. Remus, his face pale but determined, nodded. "I'll try to slow it down," he replied, raising his wand. With a swift motion, he summoned a powerful gust of wind, hoping to create enough resistance to decelerate the train. Meanwhile, Atticus focused on the poison leopard, which had retreated to a safer distance, but was still a threat. He couldn't afford to let it interfere with their efforts to avert the impending disaster. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the golden fire net soaring once more, aiming to trap the creature and keep it at bay. The Aurors, realizing the gravity of the situation, sprang into action. They began casting protective spells, forming a barrier to shield the train and its passengers from the magical battle unfolding nearby. Their wands moved in unison, creating a shimmering dome of energy that enveloped the area. As the train drew closer, its headlights cutting through the darkness, Atticus and Remus worked in tandem. The wind howled, and the ground trembled under the weight of the approaching locomotive. Every second counted, and the tension was palpable. Finally, with a collective effort, the train began to slow. The screech of metal on metal echoed through the night as it gradually came to a halt, mere yards from the broken bridge. The passengers, unaware of the magical struggle that had just saved their lives, remained blissfully ignorant of the danger they had narrowly escaped. Breathing a sigh of relief, Atticus turned his attention back to the poison leopard. The creature, now trapped within the confines of the golden fire net, snarled in frustration. Its once fierce demeanor had been replaced by a sense of resignation. "Let's secure it before it causes any more trouble," Atticus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Together with Remus and the Aurors, they worked to subdue the beast, ensuring it would no longer pose a threat. As the first light of dawn began to break, casting a warm glow over the scene, Atticus Blaine knew that they had averted disaster. The train was safe, the poison leopard contained, and the nomads none the wiser. It had been a long night, but their efforts had paid off. With the immediate danger behind them, Atticus allowed himself a moment of reflection. The events of the night had tested their resolve and showcased the power of teamwork and quick thinking. As he looked around at his companions, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie. "Good work, everyone," he said, offering a nod of appreciation. "Let's make sure everything is wrapped up here and get some rest. We've earned it." And with that, the group set about the task of restoring order, knowing that their vigilance and courage had made all the difference. Thanks to Atticus Blaine, there have not been too many nomad casualties tonight. Only a few nomads perished in the collapse of a 2-story building, which could easily be explained away as an explosion caused by a short circuit. However, if the nomads on this train were to die due to magic, it could spark an international uproar. One by one, the Aurors apparated closer, their wands waving wildly. The bridge deck, which had been knocked to the ground by the venomous leopard, flew back into the sky as if time were reversing, quickly reassembling and repairing itself. "Atticus!" Remus shouted. "You need to hide first." Atticus remained calm. He instructed Remus before stepping forward to appear beside Amelia. She was paralyzed on the ground, severely shocked, and could barely sit up, let alone stand. Without a word, Atticus grasped her uninjured arm and helped her to her feet. The golden fire that had enveloped the venomous leopard's head like a persistent curse suddenly vanished. The creature was momentarily stunned. It noticed the speeding train, but chose to ignore it, instead narrowing its eyes and focusing once more on Atticus Blaine, who was supporting Amelia. End of this chapter. Chapter 898, Trapped. After the intense battle, the venomous leopard had gained a deep understanding of Atticus Blaine's strengths and weaknesses. It realized that the wizard's powers were tied to the little wooden sticks they wielded, yet the man before it managed to keep pace with it barehanded, without faltering. Moreover, a human who could outmatch it in speed was beyond belief. The venomous leopard's imagination was captivated by this anomaly. As more wizards gathered, it knew that lingering would only lead to captivity once more. The intelligence of magical creatures is often underestimated. They possess a clarity of thought that many wizards fail to recognize. With a snap, Atticus and Amelia apparated away from the train tracks, reappearing outside the ballast. A street lamp stood tall nearby, casting a glow over the scene. The venomous leopard continued to fix its gaze on Atticus, as if committing his appearance to memory with a grudge. The speeding train was only a few hundred feet away from the leopard, poised to reach and overrun it in mere seconds. Amelia's left arm was badly burned, blood dripping from the wound. She gritted her teeth against the pain, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She glanced at the venomous leopard, about to speak, when, boom, just before the train could strike, the leopard kicked off the ground and vanished like smoke. The muggles aboard the train remained blissfully unaware of the near disaster. Laughter and chatter filled each carriage. Atticus's eyes pierced through the train, tracking the leopard as it disappeared into the woods with lightning speed. He was momentarily taken aback, unfamiliar with the creature's habits. But in an instant, he regained his composure. He appeared beside Remus with Amelia, handing her over to him, and addressed the weakened young witch. "We can't let that venomous leopard wreak havoc in the city. Many nomads will suffer if it does, but I'm afraid I can't control it with my bare hands," Atticus said, his gaze steady. Amelia bit her lip, uncertain if it was wise to entrust Atticus with her wand, especially since it was tied to her assessment task for the security department. If Mr. Grey Weiss was displeased, this rare opportunity could be lost. Remus hesitated, considering offering his wand, but Amelia had already made up her mind. She raised her hand and handed her wand to Atticus. "Ebony wand, unicorn hair, 8.5 inches long," she murmured, her cheeks flushed. Wands are deeply personal, and wizards rarely lend them to others. Remus, standing nearby, felt a twinge of regret for his earlier hesitation. "Thank you," Atticus said, without pretense. He reached out to grasp the tip of Amelia's wand while she held onto the handle. As his fingers touched the wand, Atticus's calm demeanor shifted, his eyebrows twitching. Amelia's shy expression vanished, replaced by confusion and surprise. Both felt a warm current surge from the ebony wand, linking their palms and creating a sense of shared intimacy. Amelia was bewildered by this unexpected sensation, but Atticus quickly regained his focus. He took the wand, waved it twice in the air, and smiled at Amelia. "A very nice wand. I will use it with caution," he assured her. With that, Atticus prepared to face the challenges ahead. Atticus Blaine vanished with a snap, leaving Amelia standing there, dazed and reflecting on the fleeting warmth that had just touched her heart. The murky moonlight gradually brightened as Atticus soared 1,000 feet into the air, surveying the earth below. From his unique magical perspective, he could clearly see the venomous leopard darting from the edge of the sparse woods into the denser areas. Like a streak of reddish lightning, it was clearly attempting to escape into the more complex terrain of Central Park. The hunt was on. Atticus's expression hardened. The confirmation he had just received from his wand left him displeased. He had no intention of prolonging his encounter with the venomous leopard and was prepared to use decisive force to subdue it. With a sudden flicker, Atticus's phantom form shot forward, more astonishingly swift than the venomous leopard. In just a few breaths, he closed the distance between them. The highly alert venomous leopard immediately sensed it was being pursued once more by the wizard. With its keen instincts, it recognized the gray-haired wizard who had previously engaged it, and the shadow looming above felt even more threatening than before. The leopard let out a low whimper, abruptly changing direction to cross a stone arch bridge over a small river in the garden. A young couple, caught in a passionate embrace on the bridge's railing, were swept off by the sudden gust of wind, tumbling into the river with screams. As the couple floundered in the water, a mysterious force lifted them back onto the bridge. "Ghost!" they exclaimed, trembling and exchanging fearful glances before fleeing in terror. The venomous leopard, indeed agile, leaped into the densest part of the forest, weaving through the thick trees with seemingly no inertia, attempting to shake off Atticus's pursuit. But its efforts were in vain. A cold snort echoed through the air, and the surrounding trees sprang to life. The forest transformed rapidly. Thick branches became supple and strong, turning into whips that lashed through the air with a rustling sound. The leopard, now like a fish caught in a net, found its movements increasingly restricted as countless whips coiled around it. With a fierce roar, it snapped 7 or 8 vines, strangling its neck, and spewed poisonous smoke from its mouth. The trees touched by the toxic cloud withered instantly, allowing the leopard a brief respite to break free. However, the wind quickly dispersed the poisonous mist, and more vines surged forward like cold electricity, binding its body once more. Silently, the small forest's layout shifted. The thick trees, rooted in the ground, aligned in neat rows due to spatial manipulation, growing taller by the second. When the venomous leopard finally used its claws, fangs, and toxic breath to rid itself of the vexing vines, it realized it was trapped in a wooden fortress. Its sharp eyes scanned the wooden prison encircling it. The leopard felt undeterred. With a slight crouch, its form turned to smoke again. When it reappeared, it was sprinting along the raised wooden wall, leaping with agility, poised to escape. Over the wall of the wooden prison, the poisonous leopard thought it had finally escaped to freedom. However, just as it believed it had ascended to safety, a golden fire net appeared above the dim, starry night, descending like a celestial canopy and sealing off its escape route. Boom! The poisonous leopard landed heavily on the ground. It raised its head, gazing up at the fiery net that radiated a strong aura of death, its dark pupils filled with reluctance and despair. Atticus Blaine, hovering in the air, calmly stirred his wand. The ground rumbled ominously, and the soil began to flow toward the center, causing the circular wooden wall to compress further, restricting the venom leopard's space. In the blink of an eye, the once vast cage had shrunk to the size of a classroom, and it continued to close in. Suddenly, a cat's whistle pierced the air, catching Atticus's attention. He turned toward the sound and discovered it was Hobie, the cat that had vanished amidst the chaos. Accompanying Hobie were two other cats, one with pure white fur and the other with a mix of yellow and white. "Please don't do that, Mr. Blaine," an old, slightly anxious voice emerged from the twisted space, halting Atticus from further constricting the poisonous leopard. End of this chapter. Chapter 899. Atticus Blaine halted his movements, diverting his gaze from the trio of cats that had appeared in the paddock. His attention shifted to the wizard who had just apparated nearby. The newcomer, with his completely gray short hair and beard, and the deep lines etched into his forehead and cheeks, was clearly an elderly wizard. Clad in a dark gray trench coat and vest, he exuded an aura of vitality akin to that of Dumbledore. Despite his age, he demonstrated remarkable agility, landing effortlessly from several feet above the ground without a hint of imbalance, showcasing his enduring prowess. The two men locked eyes. Like Dumbledore, the old wizard's gaze was filled with a depth of experience unexpected for someone of his years, yet it was tempered with clarity and calmness. "Please refrain from agitating this poor creature, Mr. Blaine," the old wizard addressed Atticus, his voice carrying a gentle authority. "Unless I've mistaken you for someone else, though I haven't made such an error in years." "Why?" Atticus inquired calmly. "The venom leopard has caused quite a commotion tonight. In my view, it would be prudent to confine it in a more secure location. Unless your intention is to kill it, you won't succeed," the old wizard replied, his gray eyebrows arching slightly. "It's proud, and it will not easily succumb to violence." Atticus's expression shifted slightly as he observed the venom leopard, which was frantically darting back and forth within the paddock. As Newt Scamander had noted, even in captivity, the creature never ceased its attempts to escape. It relentlessly charged at the towering trees encircling the paddock, but these magically fortified giants were unyielding. No matter how fiercely it struck, it couldn't budge them, and the fiery net above was a lethal barrier if touched. Gradually, the dark eyes of the smuggled venom leopard, now trapped in New York, reflected a deep sorrow. It panted heavily, gazing up at the dazzling golden fire dragon overhead, seemingly contemplating a desperate escape. "What do you suggest I do?" Atticus asked thoughtfully. "Prevent it from harming itself, perhaps by rendering it unconscious?" "Perhaps a gentler approach would be more effective," Newt suggested, his eyebrows twitching as he recalled Albus's words about the young man before him, who sometimes acted with decisive swiftness. "If you allow me to enter, I might be able to calm it." Atticus slowly descended onto one of the giant trees. "Of course, there's no problem with that, but please be quick. I suspect the Muggles will soon notice the disturbance, and the Aurors from the Magical Congress will arrive shortly. They've had their share of troubles tonight, and may not wait patiently for you to tame it." "I believe I can resolve the issue swiftly," Newt assured him. Atticus waved the wand he had borrowed from Amelia, and the giant tree beneath him rose, revealing a doorway large enough for a person to pass through. The restless venom leopard immediately noticed the opening. It stared at the door, whimpering softly, inching closer with caution, wary of a potential trap. The three cats nearby leaped onto Newt's shoulders and head. Sensing the danger emanating from the enclosure, they stood guard over Newt like vigilant sentinels. "Don't worry, Hobby, Millie Mahler. We can handle this, right?" Newt reassured them gently, sensing their tension. He retrieved a potion emitting a soft cyan glow from his pocket and stepped through the doorway Atticus had created. "Poor creature, what have you endured?" Newt murmured upon seeing the venom leopard, immediately noticing the scars marring its shoulders. He inhaled sharply, his heart aching for the creature. "I can help alleviate some of your pain, but only if you'll let me." "Deal?" The venomous leopard eyed the old wizard who had appeared in its field of vision, a flicker of confusion passing through its dark pupils. It sensed a gentle aura emanating from him, sparking a faint urge to approach. However, the encounters of the past 2 months had taught it caution, and it bared its teeth at Atticus Blaine, warning him to keep his distance. The breath of the venomous leopard contains a highly lethal poison originating from its venom sac. This is a double-edged sword. While it is resistant to its own venom, it still causes it pain, Atticus mused aloud. He uncorked a bottle and tapped its mouth with his wand. The potion inside began to evaporate, releasing a light cyan mist that glowed softly. With another wave of his wand, a gust of wind spread the mist throughout the paddock, filling every corner with green smoke. The sudden spread of smoke startled the leopard, causing it to retreat a few steps. Yet, as the smoke entered its nostrils, the ferocity in its eyes visibly diminished. Hissing softly, the leopard relaxed its aggressive stance, squatting on the ground and inhaling deeply. The thick venom sac around its neck, which pulsed with a rhythmic red glow, began to flash less frequently and seemed to shrink slightly. "Ah, look, it works," Atticus said with satisfaction. "But before I get too close, I should be prepared." He rummaged in his pocket and retrieved 2 more vials of potion. After downing one, he burped several times, releasing a stream of brown mist from his nose and ears. This was clearly a precaution against the leopard's toxic breath. Atticus shooed away the 3 cats that had been clinging to him, but they were reluctant to leave. They pawed at his trouser legs, clearly displeased. "No, you can't come with me. You can't withstand the poison," he admonished them, pointing towards Atticus. "Go to him and wait. If anything happens, he'll protect you." Hobie, who had been in contact with Atticus before, hesitated. He glanced at the gray-haired wizard, then met Atticus's determined gaze. Finally, he whistled to Millie and Mahler, and the 3 cats scampered up the wooden wall. Hobie settled comfortably on Atticus's shoulder, while Millie and Mahler sniffed his trouser legs before leaping up. Feeling the weight on his shoulders and head, Atticus's mouth twitched. He felt a sudden urge to lash out but restrained himself, watching Atticus below with concern. This was a world-renowned master of magical zoology, unmatched in his understanding of magical creatures. Yet Atticus worried about his age and the potential for mishaps. His concerns proved unfounded. As Atticus began to move, he displayed a surprising agility that belied his years. He bent down, pressing his hands to the ground, mimicking the movements of the venomous leopard. This was a common method for approaching wild magical creatures, but it required a deep understanding of their habits to avoid danger. With a low, rumbling sound, Atticus continued his approach, demonstrating his expertise and confidence in handling the situation. Atticus Blaine moved a few feet closer to the front, then suddenly dropped to the ground, making strange noises at the venomous leopard. He shrugged his shoulders repeatedly and mimicked licking movements. Atticus pursed his lips, the corners of his mouth twitching involuntarily. The venomous leopard appeared somewhat bewildered. It stretched its neck, staring intently at Newt, its massive body beginning to shake unconsciously as its attention gradually fixated on him. Newt continued to roll around, inching closer to the leopard. A granite-colored stone egg tumbled out of his pocket, rolling to a stop in front of the creature. Upon seeing the stone egg, the leopard's dark eyes suddenly gleamed with interest. Even Atticus, who had been tense with worry, thinking Newt had made a mistake, could see that the leopard was captivated by the stone egg. The leopard emitted a friendly growl at Newt, who remained on all fours. It then knelt down, using its powerful forelimbs to nudge the stone egg closer, playing with it between its paws. Occasionally, its long, full tongue would lick the hard surface of the egg. Witnessing this, the tension in Newt's face eased considerably. He let out a quiet sigh of relief and cautiously moved closer to the leopard, maintaining his pecol gait. End of this chapter. Chapter 900, The Expert. What followed was relatively straightforward. Newt cautiously approached the poison leopard, gently rubbing his cheek against its forelimbs. The poison leopard hesitated for a moment, then lowered its massive head, which was nearly half the size of Newt's body, and reciprocated the gesture by rubbing its cheek against his. Newt was almost knocked off his feet by the force. It seemed that a basic level of trust had been established between them. The poison leopard continued to play with the stone egg Newt had given it. Seizing the opportunity, Newt discreetly poured a potion from his other hand into his mouth and slowly moved closer to the leopard's injured shoulder. He leaned in, his lips almost touching the exposed flesh, and gently sprayed the potion onto the wound. The poison leopard, initially startled from its playful engagement with the stone egg, soon narrowed its eyes and stretched its neck, letting out a contented roar. Clearly, Newt's potion had a soothing effect. The leopard turned its head, nudging Newt affectionately, then clutched the stone egg tightly with its front paws, giving it a playful slap. It rested its head on its paws and gradually closed its eyes, drifting into a peaceful slumber. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating a soothing, rustling sound that filled the air with tranquility. Atticus Blaine blinked, momentarily speechless, as he observed the poisoned leopard sleeping so soundly. Damn it, he thought. If I had this kind of ability in my early years, I might have built a skyscraper at the orphanage. With a snap, Atticus apparated to the ground with 3 cats, waved his hand to dispel the fire net, and restored the surroundings to normal. Newt, meanwhile, took out an assortment of bottles and jars, tending to the poisoned leopard's wounds. Under his skilled care, the wound on the leopard's shoulder began to heal visibly. Atticus instinctively wanted to get closer to observe and perhaps learn something. However, as he approached, the sleeping poison leopard snorted impatiently, as if on the verge of waking up. "Oh, stay back, Mr. Blaine. Just stay there," Newt quickly advised, waving his hand with a serious expression. "This little guy doesn't like you very much." Atticus thought to himself that the poison leopard was neither weak nor little, but he heeded the expert's advice and maintained a respectful distance. "What is that stone egg?" Atticus inquired, his curiosity piqued by something he hadn't encountered before. "The egg of the Tithia gold-eating beast," Newt replied, focused on healing the leopard, but willing to answer Atticus's question. "The poison leopard is a proud, solitary creature, Mr. Blaine, which means they don't have many playmates when they're young. Few animals can endure their rough play. Typically, poison leopard mothers find Tithia gold-eater eggs as toys for their young. These eggs have the hardest shells of any known magical creature. Moreover, they emit a scent undetectable to wizards, which is quite remarkable and helps alleviate the nervous tension caused by the leopard's own toxins. Of course, these eggs are rare. Muggles and wizards alike search for gold mines, and the gold-eating beasts survive by consuming gold." Atticus pondered this information, raising an eyebrow, but I don't recall seeing any mention of this in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. "It's there," Newt said, tilting his head. "It was included until the 17th edition, but then I realized it was a mistake. It led to disaster. Wizards and goblins began capturing Tithia gold-eating beasts to locate gold mines, and wizards would use the gold-eating beasts' abilities for their own gain. The creature back for proper care." Atticus Blaine watched as Newt Scamander, the renowned magizoologist, gently patted the sleeping leopard's head and slowly stepped back. "I'm afraid it needs 2 days of rest to recuperate," Newt said, a hint of fatigue etched on his face. Despite being a centenarian, he had just performed a challenging dance to calm the cray, a chore. The 3 cats that had been perched on Atticus's shoulders and head leaped back to Newt. He playfully tapped Hobby's nose and spoke with a serious tone. "I need you to keep this a secret. Do you understand? You mustn't tell Tina about today's events. Ever since I twisted my waist, she's forbidden me from interacting with unfamiliar magical creatures. I can't convince her that they're not dangerous. They simply don't know how to handle wizards. If we approach them with kindness, there won't be any issues. Especially you, Hobby. I know you love to complain." Atticus observed the old wizard, who was earnestly conversing with the catnivs, and began to understand why Dumbledore had described Newt as a truly pure wizard during one of their post-dinner chats. "Well, I suppose I don't need to introduce myself, do I?" Newt extended his hand to Atticus. "Hobby informed me that you know I sent him to the Blind Pig Bar to gather information. I can explain. There was a misunderstanding with the bar's owner about half a century ago, and since then, Tina and I have been unwelcome there. But you know, if you want to learn anything around here, Narlax is the place to go." Atticus smiled and shook Newt's hand. "Yes, Mr. Scamander, I sensed a familiar magic from Hobby, an old friend who, as far as I know, is currently residing with you." Newt looked puzzled for a moment, but then nodded in understanding. "Ah, yes, that's right. It's probably the most unfriendly magical creature I've ever encountered. It's been alone for so long that it doesn't know how to interact with people. Newt's eyes met Atticus's with clarity. I understand what Albus meant. He said you were the sharpest wizard he'd ever met. The friendship between Dumbledore and Newt Scamander was legendary. Dumbledore's success in thwarting Grindelwald's schemes was inextricably linked to the assistance of the magazoologist standing before Atticus. Is that so? Atticus asked with a soft smile, intrigued. Did Dumbledore mention anything else about me? Before you arrived in New York, Albus wrote to me, saying you would be coming. He advised me to be cautious. Cautious? Albus said that wherever you appear, peace is elusive, and accidents tend to follow. Newt glanced at the sleeping poison leopard, a slight smile playing on his lips. Oh, this isn't my doing. I'm here to help. Atticus chuckled, amused by Dumbledore's assessment, which seemed to align with reality. Albus knows I'm here to investigate the disappearance of magical creatures. He mentioned that if I needed assistance, I could turn to you. Of course, I do need to discuss something with you, Atticus, regarding our mutual magical creature friend. Just as Atticus was about to inquire further, a large group of wizards entered his magical sensing area. Many aurors flew low on broomsticks, rapidly approaching. Newt noticed the commotion and interrupted their conversation. Perhaps we should continue this discussion at a more suitable time, Atticus. I'm afraid neither of us has the luxury of time tonight. Newt glanced at the poison leopard, pondering how to persuade the Makusa security department to allow him to take the creature for proper care. Atticus Blaine decided to take care of the situation temporarily and planned to send the creature back to its hometown at a more suitable time. If it were to fall into the hands of the security department, those rough wizards would likely just lock the poisonous leopard in a cage. Given the havoc it had wreaked in the Muggle world that night, there was even a possibility that the security department might decide to execute the poor creature. Indeed, Atticus said calmly, holding his breath. He glanced at Amelia's wand, aware that there were still many matters awaiting his attention. End of this chapter.